Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, People in Konoha. Look at me, Demacia. Chapter 1. The classic of mountains and seas has cost 800 million yuan, so what reason do we have for not working hard? Light up the 16 life stars, sacrifice to obtain items and upgrades, combined with the League of Legends game skills, it is powerful and invincible. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and confirm to enter the game with us. Crazy. Li Shuangxi looked at the shimmering and poor quality of the 2D picture, and without hesitation, he moved the mouse and clicked on the times in the upper right corner. However, as we all know, for most web push games, the close button in the upper right corner is the OK button that starts the game conversion page. Sound Yen, the great adventure is about to begin. Holy shit, Li Shuangxi was shocked, but was about to close it again when suddenly a bolt of lightning flashed across the window, and someone holding instant noodles suddenly disappeared in front of the computer desk. Rainy Land. A young man wearing a Konoha forehead protector looked ahead, his evil and feminine face showing strong interest. It was a black-haired boy. Although his face was a little immature, his black pupils contained unparalleled calmness and indifference. The rain was pouring heavily, and the two looked at each other like this for a long time. Finally, the man spoke slowly, "Come with me." The hoarse voice was different from ordinary people, but it was like Lion Majesty speaking a letter. Where to go? Konoha. A smile slowly appeared on the boy's face. Then what are you waiting for? Konoha 33 years. In the early morning, the sun is shining all over the ground, the birds are chirping, and the woods paved with green and warm orange colors are peaceful. Suddenly, a dark shadow passed through the forest and jumped onto the thick branches, wiping the morning dew off the branches and leaves. It was a ninja wrapped in a black turban, with a forehead protector representing Konoha's symbol on his head, but a mark was cut through it. What a Konoha, what a Orochimaru, but you have to wait and see. The murmur came slowly from the ninja's mouth, but it was unusually tired and hoarse. Orochimaru-sama is everything. Orochimaru-sama's words are the truth. The ninja's eyes widened suddenly with his turban exposed, but his figure had to stop and fell onto a tree trunk. On top of a towering tree in front of him, there was a young man sitting leisurely. The unobtrusive words came out of his mouth as if he were joking. Although he was telling a joke, his eyes were indifferent, as if there was no trace of emotion in his eyes. A hint of emotion. You, Konosuke, do you have to kill them all? The ninja took a few steps back in fear, staring at the boy closely, as if he was facing a huge threat. No one knows this boy better than him. He is only 6 or 7 years old. Although he looks ordinary on the surface, as the secret tool of Orochimaru's nominal adopted son, his companions who have secretly performed missions together know that although it does not appear to be capable of any ninjutsu, the powerful bloodline limit is enough to instantly kill any enemy, including Chunin, who is several times stronger than Genin. It's useless to talk more. In this war period, everything is not the reason for your defection. Konoha will eventually win, and smart people will make choices. The young man named Konosuke waved his hands and chuckled, but it was like chatting with a friend. There is no choice, but there is no turning back. Maybe, this is the fate and sorrow that the ninja has to bear, then. The ninja lowered his eyes slightly, but before he finished speaking, his figure suddenly flashed. Disappeared in front of Konosuke's eyes. We must not let him use the bleeding limit. Konosuke curled his lips, climbed down the tree trunk with his toes, and dodged the whirling shurikens while turning around. Nagajangawa, is this all you have? However, as soon as he finished speaking, a loud shout came from under his feet, Earth style, behead technique in your heart. Konosuke was slightly surprised, and allowed this technique to pull him into the earth, but he praised, there are not many people who know how to behead technique in their hearts. Nagajangawa, you are living so well, why don't you want to be in Orochimaru? How about a good job in your hands? Absurd. Orochimaru. Ha, you are like a lackey, put away your hypocritical mask. A hoarse voice came from behind Konosuke, and at the same time there was the sound of the ninja's sword rubbing against the ground. I will bind your whole body under the ground. Under the strong pressure, you will not be able to move at all. In this way, you will not be able to form a seal, and at the same time, your blood inheritance limit will not be able to be used. Konosuke tried his best to twist his head back, as if he didn't care about the coming murderous intention. Huh? Do you still know the limits of blood inheritance? Nagajanchuan's words surprised him. Remember, it was only in the middle period of Hokage that the exclusive term, blood succession limit, could be mentioned. Naga Genshuin was not an excellent ninja. He was only in the 33rd year of Konoha. How could he do this? Is the following boundary like a bad street? Forget it, who cares? Immediately, a trace of ridicule appeared on Kinosuke's lips. It seems that you don't fully understand the boundaries of blood succession. Who told you that the boundaries of blood succession must be sealed? And then he smiled slightly but said rather mysteriously, let me tell you a secret, this, of mine is not the limit of blood inheritance. Wah! What? Naga Genshuin was shocked. Looking at Kinosuke with only his head exposed on the ground, he seemed to see the devil smile in a daze. He quickly raised his knife to chop it off, but it seemed it was too late. In the sky above, a huge sword that was as transparent as energy was formed out of thin air. Before he could react, the huge light had already fallen. Bang! A burst of flying dust rose up, and huge air pressure shot out in all directions, along with some flying rocks and broken branches. After the smoke and dust passed, Kinosuke patted the dust on his body. Apart from being dirty, his whole body was not damaged at all. Not expected you could survive this move of mine. It seems that the innocent life ended at your hands. It's not too much. Ahem. Why? Weak words spat out from Chong Yuanchuan's mouth, but they seemed so weak. What? Kinosuke tilted his head. Why can you do it without any seals? Ahem. I've clearly seen you with seals before. That's what you mean. Kinosuke suddenly realized, and then told a truth that made Nagamotokawa almost vomit blood. This move can be used without forming a seal. Then why did you? Chong Yuanchuan's eyes widened, extremely puzzled. Don't you think you'll be more powerful after forming the seal? Puff. Chong Yuanchuan vomited blood, but he became more and more angry. He opened and closed his lips as if he wanted to say something, but he was unable to make any sound after all because he was too injured. Kinosuke couldn't help but tilt his head to the side again. Come to hell with me. Kinosuke. A squeaking sound came from under Chong Yuanchuan, which was the sound of the detonating talisman about to explode. Boom. A blast resounded through the forest sky, and the entire forest seemed to be shaken. After a while, a black shadow emerged awkwardly from the smoke, and it was undoubtedly Kinosuke. Bah, you Chong Yuanchuan, I have always regarded you as a brother, but you want to blow me up. Someone who jumped angrily at the charred corpses in front of him did not realize at all that he had deliberately given people behavior that creates the illusion of a seal is also deceptive and even worse. It's a waste of my points. Someone cursed for a long time, but finally calmed down, stretched out his hand and pressed it on the charred corpse. Sacrifice. Words that seemed to be whispered by a demon came out of his mouth, and then the corpse turned into glass and shattered in a burst of white light, slowly breaking down into countless light spots and dissolving in the void. My name is Li Shuangxi, a Chinese, and my current name is Kinosuke. It has been 7 years since I traveled to the world of Hokage. It is probably difficult to imagine how a modern person can survive in such a meat grinder world. Down. All the reasons are attributed to that copycat online game, a pirated copy of a certain Shuin competitive game, a low-definition web game called 16 Stars. Like all party traveling routines, for some magical and unknown reason, I was lucky enough to integrate the abilities of the protagonist of the game. I continuously sacrificed to obtain special points, and then lit up the life star to obtain magical abilities. A total of 16 life stars can be lit up. Each time the life star is lit up, the embodied projection of a certain hero in the alliance will be given to him and continuously fused with his body, and he can use all their skills. Of course, they must be used before the complete fusion. Their abilities require corresponding sacrifice points. And the first destiny star I lit up was Sao Kong Lun. A few days later, Orochimaru residence. Kinosuke ate in silence, and Orochimaru was sitting opposite him. Under his long black hair, his handsome face was set against his fair skin, and his lines revealed a faint feminine beauty. What a long, straight black man. However, the relationship between the two was not as good as imagined. The two of them were silent at the silent dinner table, and the meal passed quietly in silence. After eating, Kinosuke came to the corridor at the door and sat in a daze with nothing to do. Orochimaru has a traditional Japanese style, but it is different from the Chinese garden-like scenery. Even if you want to improvise something poetic and picturesque, it will not work. During the time here, besides being bored and dazed every day, Konosuke was occasionally given some special tasks by Orochimaru every night. And these tasks are nothing more than killing people. As for who to kill, during the current war, the village is also quite turbulent. Although Konoha, which is jointly attacked by various ninja villages, is strong, it is not stable. Any region will breed certain special beings during this period, that is, traitor. Ninja society, survival of the fittest, is a bloody and cruel society, including Konoha village, which has always been recognized by other ninja villages as Konoha of Fire. It also has some unknown dark colors hidden in dark corners. In fact, except for these things, this person is no different from ordinary people at other times, but he has a vague sense of rejection towards the world, but he has never walked outside the house. And Orochimaru has barely stayed here a few times since he brought him back. Therefore, it is not an exaggeration to say that this courtyard belongs to Konosuke in a certain sense. There is always a feeling of being taken care of by Orochimaru. Looking at the faint sakura flowers, Konosuke remembered the embarrassment of eating before and couldn't help but shake his head. Different values show different manifestations. People without value have no meaning of existence. I don't raise idle people here. A cold voice suddenly sounded from behind, but it was Orochimaru. Konosuke was startled when he heard this. It seems that according to Orochimaru's words, he still has high utilization value. The gift from God has given you powerful abilities, but you are like a frog at the bottom of a well, sitting on nothing. Fortunately, not everything can be obtained for free. Orochimaru said some incomprehensible words like this, always feeling like he was pointing out something. Konosuke glanced sideways at Orochimaru's pale face, his expression slightly hesitant. It was only the early days of Konoha, and Orochimaru still had a lot of sense, and was not as crazy as he was at the beginning of the Hokage plot. Ever since Orochimaru's arrival, the courtyard has been filled with a kind of silent and mysterious embarrassment. The talkative person was now speechless by Uncle Snake's inherent coldness. The two of them spent a long time like this. People always undergo transformation in loneliness, but sometimes this is not a good thing. Konosuke looked at Orochimaru's back in surprise, not knowing what to say. It was different from the pervert and indifference in the subsequent plot. Today's Uncle Snake still has a hint of humanity and a literary youth. At least, I can't say such a beautiful sentence that is rich in life philosophy. But after Uncle Snake said these incomprehensible words, he no longer gave anyone time to ask questions, and turned directly back to the room. Uncle Snake is also a human being and needs to rest. As for whether the extremely modern human experiments are being carried out now, Konosuke, who has only watched a few Hokage episodes, can only say that he knows nothing about them. Nowadays, the situation is turbulent and disputes are everywhere. There seems to be no sign of stopping the small-scale struggle. As a result, the ninjas in Konoha village have endless things to do every day. Fortunately, the Second Ninja World War has passed the stage of intensification, and limited time gave all ninja villages relatively space to cultivate and recuperate. By the way, since I came to the Hokage world, I have never seen the streets of Konoha. Konosuke felt bored by himself. He had given it up before, but now after listening to Orochimaru, he also felt that he really shouldn't have brought such a bad nature as an otaku into this world. Walking out of Orochimaru's residence, someone was wandering aimlessly, and Konoha's unique architectural style came into view. The majestic Hokage rock and numerous buildings with special pipes seem to have been built randomly but have their own unique flavor. Everything seems to indicate that Konosuke has come to a different world. Although the war has passed its peak, it is still a war period, and there are many people walking on the street. Whether a village is prosperous or not can be judged by the people passing by. Although he does not know the situation of other shinobi villages, Shinosuke is absolutely certain that Konoha village must be more prosperous than the poor sand shinobi village. After all, the geographical environment of Konoha village is much better than that of other countries. Compared with the yellow sand, a vast stretch without a blade of grass can be said to be 1,000 miles of fertile wilderness. Therefore, the inherent sad atmosphere during the war is not very obvious here. After all, Konoha protects the village too well. Konosuke walked casually on the street, showing great curiosity about everything. He looked around and tasted the customs here. Hey, kid, you hit me. Suddenly a soft feeling came from his head, followed by a rather heroic voice. Before someone looked up, a sweet fragrance immediately came, and then a strand of long golden hair hung down, coupled with a beautiful voice. It was definitely a woman. I have to say that the quality of the beauties in Hokage is not very good. When someone was bowing his head in thought, a slightly helpless voice sounded again from the other side. Hey, kid, don't look around when you're walking. Although he didn't look up, someone had already obtained countless information, but he secretly thought in his heart, is this the welfare of time travelers, a beautiful encounter? So countless thoughts flashed through someone's mind, and then they chose the safest one. As if someone was unaware of it, he fell backwards and fell to the ground. Ah yo! The person who was knocked down deliberately groaned and lay on the ground unwilling to get up. Open hollow lens bracket profound meaning great heavenly dynasty touching porcelain technique close hollow lens bracket. Hey, kid, what are you doing? The heroic voice sounded again. But he was already a little angry. Konosuke slowly raised his head. First, he was wearing a Jonin vest. His long golden hair was spread out. On his delicate face, a pair of thin eyebrows were slightly frowned. At this time, the owner of this body was standing in the middle of the road, looking slightly helpless. Look at yourself. It was obvious that someone's expression was very good, but it shocked the other party who had never seen such a battle before. However, at this moment, Konosuke's heart was filled with endless turmoil. Isn't this Tsunade? Are you okay? Tsunade looked hesitant for a while and asked again, but then he extended his hand to Konosuke who fell to the ground. Konosuke was slightly confused, but he couldn't help but blush. He secretly complained about the bloody plot. He felt bored, but he stood up and wiped away the dust caused by falling to the ground. I'm fine. I've been suffering from malnutrition recently. I got knocked down so easily. It seems I still need to exercise more. I have something else to do, so let's go first. Seeing this farce-like scene, Tsunade couldn't help but be stunned. She still kept her hand stretched out and felt a bit overwhelmed. After a few breaths, she retracted her hand and turned to look at Konosuke's back as he ran away in a hurry, with a pretty face. There was a weird smile on it. Isn't this the child adopted by Orochimaru? He's acting really weird. But someone who was running away in a hurry was extremely lucky at this time. I really admire my courage. I didn't know how I died in front of Tsunade, who is called the god of medicine. Fortunately, I ran fast. Scared me. The encounter with Tsunade was just an insignificant episode. In the end, Konosuke walked towards Orochimaru's residence with a stinky face and a faint pain in his buttocks. Recently, the number of times he went out to perform secret missions became less and less, and the points he had accumulated were gone. It's a bit stretched, so when can we light up the second life star? When can we be strong? When can we defeat those boss-like beings in the Hokage? Why not go find Orochimaru and pick up a few quests? I want to become stronger. Because this is during World War II. But even during World War II, missions in the village were extremely rare if they did not enter the battlefield. Missions such as killing traitorous ninjas like before were not common. It's just that for others, this kind of dangerous figure is a rare good opportunity for someone. That evening, at the dining table, Konosuke, your ambition seems to be more ambitious than usual. Uncle Snake's cold words came, but they also contained some teasing. There is no ambition, but why does have some. What, do you want to see it? A certain person just lowered his head to eat, unmoved by Uncle Snake's questions. Take some time to tidy up after eating. Konosuke, who was eating, was stunned and looked up at the door, but Orochimaru was nowhere to be seen. This is nonsense. Silently complaining in his heart, Konosuke swept away all the food on the table, and then washed the dishes one by one. After finishing it, which only lasted about 10 minutes, Konosuke took a nap for a while, but he only felt that the strength in his body had increased a bit. The surge of power in my body has become more frequent recently. Konosuke raised his arm in confusion and clenched his fist vigorously. It seemed that he could use more strength. He knew that this was the first destiny star that was subtly assimilating his body. Fusion of life stars requires one's own body to adapt and assimilate. There is a quite long buffer period, and you need to wait slowly. But it's worth it. After the two are completely integrated, it is time to light up the second life star. Of course, the premise is that he must have enough sacrifices. After finishing the meal, we came to the corridor, but Uncle Snake had already started to drink tea silently in the dusk. Someone is used to it, sitting directly across from him, filling himself up with a glass and drinking it all in one gulp. To be honest, some people are still not used to drinking this kind of boiled tea. Konosuke, do you want to go to school? Just when someone was drowsy, Orochimaru suddenly spoke, his slightly hoarse voice as cold as ever. Operator, oh operator, what? Konosuke was stunned. This kind of instant feeling, like an out-of-school child being cared for, should not happen to me. Orochimaru looked forward with deep eyes and said calmly, Ninja School, the great reform established during the Second Generation Project, a very great existence. You need to find your true value there. Konosuke was confused after hearing this. Although he didn't know what he was going to do in the ninja school, he was not stupid. He could guess Orochimaru's intention with just a little thought. If I enter the ninja school, what will happen in the future? Konosuke is very concerned about this issue. Orochimaru turned his head slightly and looked at Konosuke, shook his head slightly, and said coldly, where the foundation is laid, relying too much on the blood succession limit is not the best choice. As for the mission, there is no need to do it in the future. It's just to lay the foundation. Don't you want me to develop contacts? Konosuke was slightly surprised, but he nodded in the face of Uncle Snake's cold eyes. I see. 3 years should be enough time for me to escape World War II. Konosuke thought silently, clenching his fists and feeling a strong fighting spirit in his heart. In the days that followed, probably because the fusion of the Destiny Stars finally entered a critical period, Konosuke's appetite increased every day, and Uncle Snake's plan to rescue out-of-school children was approaching day by day. Finally, until one day, when someone was busy in the kitchen, Uncle Snake suddenly appeared in front of him and fulfilled his promise. He said this. Come with me when you're ready. This is obviously very abrupt. Although Konosuke was very surprised, he was mentally prepared. He changed into clothes for going out and followed Orochimaru out the door. Just like the children in the mountains finally got rid of the endless farm work and went to the city to go to school. It was certainly like some kind of twist of fate. The ninja school influxes new forces every year on this day. The famous 4th Hokage will also enter the ninja school on this day. Except for Namikaze Minato, there are almost no outstanding ninjas in the same period. However, now there is an alien like Konosuke. It can be seen that today is the day to register. Along the way, all kinds of parents and their children are flocking to the ninja school. But even so, the duo of Konosuke and Orochimaru are still the bright spots among human rights. Those who have not experienced this era will never know how prestigious the legendary Sannin is in Konoha at this time. Lord Orochimaru, I'm going to give you a monkey. Orochimaru-sama is so handsome. You have to work hard and become an outstanding ninja like Orochimaru-sama in the future. Various voices of praise and admiration kept coming, flooding into Konosuke's ears. Konosuke listened to the whispers of those people, looked at the unabashed admiration of those people, and finally looked at Orochimaru's back, but he did not have the feeling of, I will become like this person from now on, in my heart for no reason. A great man, thought, because he knew that this person would become a being that everyone in Konoha would beat up in the future. In other words, some kind of bureaucracy will exist in any world. Orochimaru, who has the name of Sannin, plus the identity of a disciple of the 3rd generation. Even if you go through the admission procedures, you must not join the ordinary stream. After arriving at the ninja school, the receptionist was not only enthusiastic, but also extremely efficient. They quickly registered Konosuke, and within a few minutes, someone who had not yet reacted had officially become a member of Konohagakure. Ninja trainee. After all the things that needed to be done were done, Orochimaru didn't even look at Konosuke, didn't give the necessary instructions, and left without saying a word. Uncle Snake is really cool. Konosuke, who had long been accustomed to Orochimaru, just curled his lips and watched Orochimaru's figure disappear from sight, and then followed Chunin, who was in charge of reception, towards the classroom. Or maybe, if it weren't for Orochimaru's identity, this Chunin wouldn't take the initiative to take Konosuke to the classroom. On the way, Chunin quietly looked at Kinosuke and felt that Kinosuke was very different from other children of the same age. The biggest difference was that Kinosuke was too calm and did not have the excitement that a child should have. Speaking of naughty children, they are the most annoying. This is it. Within a moment, they stopped in front of a door. Chunin pointed at the classroom door and smiled. Thanks. Kinosuke thanked him, opened the classroom door and walked in. At this time, there were many people in the classroom. When they saw the door open, the noisy sound stopped instantly. Everyone couldn't help but look at Kinosuke, who had just walked in. But after all, they are children, and their attention is often distracted. Someone's dress is not eye-catching, so everyone's eyes only stayed for a few breaths and then moved away. Everyone was doing their own things, except for one glance. Move away. After Namikaze Minato saw Kinosuke, his eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. When he saw Kinosuke looking at him, with a soft smile on his face, he stood up and waved. It seems that the fourth generation project already had the powerful appeal of the future in its childhood. Before entering the ninja school, some of these peers had met each other many times even if they were not familiar with each other. However, Kinosuke seemed to appear out of nowhere. Before that, none of the children in the classroom had seen him. Kinosuke stood at the door and looked at Minato silently. With his golden hair and sapphire eyes, he recognized the future fourth Hokage at a glance. He ignored the others and only Minato greeted him warmly. He was considering whether to go to Minato's side, but the vain dignity of an adult made him hesitate. Minato seemed to notice Kinosuke's hesitation, and a gleam of curiosity flashed in his eyes. For some reason, ever since Kinosuke walked in, he felt deeply that this boy was different, just like a duck entering a flock of chickens, a fundamental difference. People are social creatures, and even children will consciously form groups, which can be as large as 7 or 8, or as small as 2 or 3. Minato is handsome and has a gentle and lovable personality, so he has many friends around him. Kinosuke's eyes glanced at the slightly crowded seat next to Minato, and then he sighed, silently looking away, and walked towards a quieter corner. He never thought about integrating into a group, especially a group of naughty children. This is probably the unique way of being an otaku. Seeing that Kinosuke ignored him again, Minato slowly lowered his arms in the strange eyes of many people, turned to touch his head, smiled awkwardly, and then sat down, but at the moment of sitting down, he quietly glanced at Kinosuke. There was deep doubt in his eyes. After he sat down, his friends of the same age asked Minato whether he was acquainted with Kinosuke, but Minato vaguely ignored them. It was his attitude that made his friends feel that Kinosuke was rude. The gentleman did not get angry because of this, but instead wondered about Kinosuke's obvious withdrawal. Kinosuke, who has an adult mentality and does not like to hang out with a group of naughty children, did not notice Minato's worries. The seat he chose was in the last row of the classroom, next to the window, and there was no one there. After he sat down, he turned his gaze looking out the window at the playground. It is summer, the sun is dazzling and hot, and the bright light shines into the eyes as if it can create reflections. About 10 minutes later, the classroom door was pushed open with a crash, and a middle-aged man with a slightly arrogant appearance walked in. When he closed the door with his backhand, the originally noisy sound in the classroom suddenly stopped. The man saw that the classroom became quiet immediately after he entered, and nodded without any trace. He glanced at everyone with his sharp eyes, and then walked to the podium. His pace was a bit uncoordinated. The teaching staff during World War II was excellent. The ninjas who served as teachers were all elites who had retired from the battlefield. The reason why these elites retreated behind the scenes was because they had no choice. As long as they went to the battlefield, except for those who could escape unscathed, the rest many people are either dead or suffering from hidden diseases that affect their strength, just like this little shonan, although it is impossible to see where he was injured. But this is a time of employment, and the ninja school will not find a person with sound limbs to be a teacher. Xiao Shouo is not a strong figure. He wears a Konoha forehead protector on his forehead and his hair is wrapped in a blue turban. His facial features are very ordinary. Or perhaps this ordinariness is one of the reasons why he was able to survive the battlefield. 1. My name is Aoi, and I will be your teacher from now on. First of all, I am not deliberately targeting anyone. My awareness is just that everyone here is rubbish. Teacher, were you so fierce when you first started? Although Aoi has a weak face, her tone is very cold and stiff. That dull voice knocks on everyone's heart, but it makes people feel a kind of contempt because of her appearance and her new appearance. It disappeared in an instant, and even worse, it made many people subconsciously feel timid. At the same time, the Hokage office. After the third Hokage finished approving a document, he suddenly stood up and walked to the window, looked in the direction of Konoha School, and whispered to himself, "The war has caused too much damage to the village, but the next generation will eventually be burned by the nutrients of the predecessors, growing up healthily." What he didn't know was that Aoi gave all the children a profound shock as soon as he appeared on the stage. The contrast between his face and tone made these children at a loss what to do. There was silence in the classroom. Faced with Aoi's sudden tyrannical aura, many people lowered their eyes. Only a few did not look away, including Konosuke and Minato. In a few breaths, Aoi remembered these children who were not overwhelmed by his own momentum, and then restrained his own momentum, clapped his hands, and his tone became a little softer but still seemed dull. "Okay, from left to right, give a brief introduction to yourself." It didn't take too long. After the self-introduction time, Aoi immediately started teaching. Chakra is a kind of energy produced by the perfect fusion of mental energy and physical energy. It is also the energy necessary to use ninjutsu. The first condition for becoming a ninja is to be able to absorb chakra and make it an energy that you can control. Quote. Aoi's tone was not exciting at all, but his speaking speed was neither urgent nor slow, and his articulation was extremely clear, which was quite suitable for giving lectures. He suddenly raised 3 fingers and said in a low voice, 3 years, you have 3 years to come. Learn how to be a ninja. Aoi suddenly lowered 2 of the 3 fingers she raised, and her tone suddenly became stern, but you only have 1 year to verify whether you have the qualifications to become a ninja. If your performance still cannot satisfy me after 1 year, if so, then go back. Gulu. The moment Aoi stopped speaking, the classroom was very quiet, so quiet that even the sound of someone swallowing saliva seemed a little clear. Konosuke curled his lips, but in his heart he secretly criticized Aoi's judging criteria. It's not that easy to become a ninja. If you don't have enough talent and choose to do it, you are irresponsible to yourself. Aoi's eyes became deep, as if he remembered something, which made his tone become more and more dull. The existence of the meat grinding ground of World War II made him see too much. After half a day, Konosuke felt drowsy after listening. Anyway, Aoi didn't plan to teach too much at the beginning, but only gave a simple explanation of the existing system. Ninja, this is the collective name for people with strange abilities. Divided into Genin, Chunin, Special Jonin, Jonin and Shadow. There is a clear level system among ninjas, and the key to measuring level lies in the amount of chakra and the use of ninjutsu. People who can use ninjutsu well are extremely talented beings. These people are born with penultimate chakra control. After returning to the house, Konosuke was thinking about the word ninja. Now he was truly exposed to the profession of ninja. Although he was not even the most ordinary genin, according to Aoi it is said that it will take him 3 years to have a chance to become a genin, rather than becoming a genin directly. What's more, if he can't condense chakra, he can only be isolated from the profession of ninja. Laozi once killed Chunin with bare hands, although I haven't condensed chakra yet. Aoi, who is the teacher, is a Chunin, so Orochimaru, who adopted him, should be at least a Jonin at this time. As long as he can condense chakra, if he has any questions, he can always ask Orochimaru for advice, and it will definitely be faster than Aoi's follow-up instructions. Orochimaru is right, relying too much on the life star is not a good thing. If you are strong enough, you can use less skills during battle and wait for it to slowly integrate. This can at least save a lot of points. From this point of view, meeting Uncle Snake is not a bad thing, even though Uncle Snake has a bad temper and is always willing to kill people. Fine. Staring down at the small palm, Konosuke's eyes were full of motivation. The tension caused by the war never seemed to affect the children in the ninja school. They were well protected by the village. They played and had no shortage of laughter. Being born in Konoha may be a blessing in itself. Even Konoha also hides some darkness that others don't know about, but compared to other ninja villages, it is already excellent. After becoming withdrawn on the first day of school, Kinosuke seemed to be isolated by all his classmates, but this was exactly what he wanted. As an adult soul, he has no desire to get involved with children, so he is still in that corner, still alone, happy and quiet. As for the daily classes, it is different from the anime where Naruto and others skip school and do nothing all day long. In addition to the use of chakra and various seals, the real ninja class also has many professional courses involving physics and other subjects. Although it is different, science in modern society is the primary productive force, but the science here is specially selected to better assist ninjas in fighting. Therefore, although some of ninja fighting or throwing ninja tools comes from one's own instinct and experience engraved on the body through years of practice, most of it relies on scientific and precise calculations. Although Aoi lost a leg on the battlefield, she is still very knowledgeable. In the first few days of school, she has become proficient in everything from chakra extraction and application, to the release of ninjutsu, to the use of ninja tools and throwing techniques. Sometimes it was just a fight between two genin, which seemed ordinary, but he broke it down and analyzed it, and listed dozens of formulas, and combined advanced physics and advanced mathematics, but Kinosuke was stunned for a moment. I must have picked up the wrong science and technology book. What the hell is this painful analytical formula for trigonometric functions? Shouldn't the scene about the ninja school in the cartoon be a playful lesson about throwing kunai and throwing shurikens? What kind of fun is this heaven-defying cultural lesson? For him who has been fused with Demacia's Galen life star, his instinct to fight continues to improve with the fusion. For this mere chunin, the culture class teacher Kinosuke is completely confident that he can resolve the battle in a few minutes. But as for the use of brains, as a Chinese who came from the elite tactics of Tihai, he expressed his shame for the education of his motherland. The brain is a good thing, but, staring at the empty playground outside the window, Kinosuke sighed slowly. He suspected that if he spent 3 years like this, he might go crazy. Wow! The sound of the door being opened caught Kinosuke's attention. Aoi, who was strong but with a small face, walked in expressionlessly, followed by a girl with bright red hair behind him. The moment the door opened, everyone stopped their actions and sat quietly. However, when they saw the girl with red hair, many people couldn't help but whisper. The senses of ninjas are very sharp. Even though the voices of those who spoke were extremely low, Aoi could still hear them. He frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, "Quiet." What Aoi said was more useful than anything else. Once Xiao Shou became serious, such a huge contrast was even more intimidating. In an instant, the whispering children shut their mouths. Kinosuke looked at the girl with her head slightly lowered, and was a little distracted for a moment. This girl looked so familiar. Could it be her? The wife of the fourth Hokage, Uzumaki Kushina. This girl with bright red hair was Uzumaki Kushina. She quietly raised her head and glanced at the people sitting upright. With everyone's watching eyes, she began to feel nervous, but even so, a certain persistence in her heart made her persist. He raised his head and faced the numerous glances. Seeing that the classroom was finally quiet, Aoi glanced at the strong girl with satisfaction and said calmly, "You can briefly introduce." Aoi was only halfway through her words, perhaps too nervous, when Kushina raised her head and loudly interrupted, "I am Uzumaki Kushina, the future Hokage." Aoi was stunned, looking at Kushina, who had her head raised and her body trembling slightly nervously, and shook her head slightly, not caring about anything. After introducing herself, Kushina realized that she had accidentally expressed her inner ambition, and quickly covered her mouth, with a faint blush appearing on both sides of her cheeks. After a brief silence in the classroom, the movement suppressed by Aoi suddenly rebounded. Look at the color of her hair. Someone turned his head and smiled at his partner next to him. What a strange color. What can I do to be as popular as her? What a strange girl. Kinosuke turned his head and glanced at these childish brats, and then looked at Aoi. In his opinion, if Aoi was normal, he would probably show his majesty and suppress these brats into silence at the first time, but he didn't know why. Aoi didn't speak this time and allowed the classmates in the classroom to comment on Kyuyuki Na's hair. Kinosuke frowned slightly, with confusion in his eyes. Listening to their wanton discussion, Kushina touched her hair silently. She could not refute, because she also hated this bright red hair, but, no matter how much she hated this hair, she would not allow others to belittle and talk about it like this. I want to be the first female Hokage in this village. The words were shocking and endless, which made all the voices suddenly quiet. The person who was talking before looked at Kushina with wide eyes and surprise, but for a moment they didn't know what to say. Hokage. Konosuke turned his head to look, but smiled curiously, secretly thinking that it was true. Aoi still stood beside Kushina without saying a word. At this time, when everyone was silent, Minato stood up, put his right hand into a fist on his chest, squinted his eyes, and also made his second-grade declaration, "I also want to be an outstanding Hokage recognized by everyone." Kushina looked at Minato, who smiled softly, but she was not so optimistic, because she only thought that Minato smiled like a girl and looked unreliable at all. She couldn't help but curse in her heart, how could such a person become a Hokage? Minato didn't know Kushina's true thoughts and kept a gentle smile on his face, but what he said was also a true declaration from the heart. Perhaps few people present could see how serious Minato was about these words, but Konosuke knew that he did it after understanding the plot. Compared with what Kushina was forced to shout subconsciously due to the atmosphere, the words Minato narrated are more convincing. "You find a seat and sit down." Aoi, who had been silent all this time, glanced at Minato and then said, "Oh." Kushina responded, like Konosuke, but chose an empty seat. After Kushina sat down, Aoi said solemnly, "Let's start class." After that, there was another tedious lecture time, and various high-end formulas appeared in front of him again. Konosuke felt that he was going crazy. Maybe I have only seen the glamorous side of ninjas in anime before, but I don't know how much effort they put in privately, even if they are a genin. After an hour, Aoi finally ended this lesson, turned around and walked out of the classroom, leaving the children present with a very short rest. After Aoi walked out of the classroom, the dull atmosphere suddenly became joyful, as if a withered flower bloomed again in a few breaths. Several restless and naughty boys immediately approached Kushina and surrounded her at the back of the classroom. One of the boys pointed at Kushina and smiled strangely, "Tomato. Red hair and round face, just like a tomato." Quote, "Haha, I hate eating tomatoes." Another boy who got a haircut agreed, "Me too, I always have tomatoes left over from every meal." The tomato that everyone hates can also become a Hokage. Don't be delusional. A boy raised his hands and put his head behind his head and laughed. As soon as his words fell, everyone surrounding Kushina burst into laughter. Surrounded by so many people and listening to their jeers, Kushina's cheeks turned rosy again. She couldn't help but lower her head in shyness. Her red face really looked like a tomato. But Konosuke felt that this was a sign that Kushina was about to explode. Minato, who was sitting in the front row, heard the sound and turned to look at Kushina, who was surrounded by everyone. He didn't want to come forward at first, but remembering the declaration that the girl had the courage to make before, and the girl who had the courage to raise her head even though she was trembling nervously. Strong, this scene aroused some wonderful emotions in him. Wow, it's getting more and more mature. Looking at Kushina, whose face was getting redder and redder, one of the boys couldn't help but stretched out his hand to grab Kushina's hair while laughing. A slender but powerful hand caught the boy's outstretched hand in time. Kushina noticed the movement and was too late to react. She looked sideways, but the expected pain did not come. When she raised her head, she saw a slightly handsome blonde boy holding the hand that wanted to pull her hair with a serious expression. But it was the person who looked like a girl just now. In the classroom, everyone who was paying attention to this scene was stunned, and the atmosphere became silent. Minato's strength was obviously not small, and he held the boy's hand firmly, but this undoubtedly aroused the boy's anger. "You, what are you doing?" The boy whose hand was held by Minato looked extremely dissatisfied and glared at Minato. The friends next to him also yelled at him. "You disturbed me." Konosuke pouted, and after speaking, he flicked his arm and opened the two people's clasped hands. He didn't want to worsen the situation further. After all, it was meaningless. Those annoying formulas were enough to trouble him, but he didn't want to do it again. Trouble. After they separated, he immediately said no more, turned around and walked towards the door. "That fool." The boy with the short hair touched his wrist and cursed in a low voice. Knowing Konosuke's character well, he didn't dare to take the initiative to get back to the situation. The moment his wrist was thrown away, he almost had the illusion that it was broken. Imagine how intense the pain was in that moment. "Are you okay?" The others looked at the redness and swelling on the wrist of the boy with the short hair, a hint of timidity in their eyes, and the impulse that surged from their hearts slowly receded. Powerful, it can always be used as a barrier, whether it is used to attack, protect or mediate disputes. Fine. The short-haired boy covered his wrists and took a breath from time to time. He glared at Kinosuke's side face fiercely. He no longer had any interest in bullying Kushina or complaining about Minato. He turned around and walked to his seat. The others looked at each other. They also returned to their seats without any interest. Seeing the classmates surrounding her walking away, Kushina raised her head slightly and looked at Minato with a hint of blame in her eyes. Even if Minato hadn't grabbed the hand on his own initiative, she would have exploded and killed the classmate. Beat him up. That person. She silently looked at Kinosuke, who tilted his chin and turned to look out the window. Even if he could only see half of his profile, she could clearly see the distinctive temperament on his face. After watching for a moment, she walked back slowly. At her seat, she noticed a gaze, and when she followed it, it was Minato. "Thank you very much just now," she said casually. Minato was startled, but he smiled and looked away, continuing to chat with his friends beside him. Although he was chatting, from the corner of his eye, he was paying attention to Kushina, who was sitting in his seat, and Kinosuke, who was staring at the scenery outside the window. Time flies so fast, half a year has passed in the blink of an eye. Puff puff. It was almost a muffled sound in series, and the three kunai hit the bullseye one after another. There is nothing fancy about Kinosuke's movements. He just pulls out the kunai, raises his hand and shoots out. A series of movements are extremely skillful and done in one go. 3 black shadows shot out from his hand, and the next moment 3 more muffled sounds were heard. Puff puff. Aoi first glanced at the 6 kunai stuck in the center of the target, and then looked at Kinosuke, who had a relaxed look on his face. With a hint of surprise in his eyes, he said in a deep voice, "Kinosuke, perfect score." It is hard to imagine that someone who has always failed cultural classes could do this just by relying on his own instinct, but there is no doubt that most top ninjas fight by instinct. The content of the assessment is to shoot 6 kunai, and you only need to hit 3 to pass. However, Kashinosuke threw 3 kunai in each hand, and all of them hit the bullseye. This child undoubtedly put in a lot of effort in throwing kunai. This is genius. For half a year, Kinosuke spent all his time practicing ninjutsu using ninja tools, without wasting any free time. The accuracy and strength he has now are also due to his own efforts. This is natural. He wants to. We have proven that you can travel all over the world even if you have not learned mathematics, physics and chemistry well. He quickly walked towards the target, pulled out the kunai from the bullseye and put it back into the ninja tool bag hanging on his waist, and then retreated to the queue that had already been tested. Regardless of whether they were those who had passed the test or those who had not, the eyes looking at him were full of surprise. Minato raised his left hand subconsciously. When it came to the use of ninja tools, he was confident that he was no worse than Kinosuke, and as the golden flash of the future, his kunai throwing skills should not be too bad either. Next, Namikaze Minato. After hearing the teacher's roll call, Minato walked out of the queue, came to the designated position, paused for a few breaths, then raised his hand and threw 6 kunai, hitting the bullseye accurately but without any fancy. Namikaze Minato. Full marks. Next, Uzumaki Kushina. Aoi glanced at the bullseye and then looked away, and read out the next person's name in a deep voice. There are many outstanding people in this issue, but there is no doubt that Kinosuke, Namikaze Minato, and Uzumaki Kushina are all outstanding. But one of them, the slender Hei Changji, caught Kinosuke's attention. Her eyes were as pure as amber, her face was neither sad nor happy, and she was as elegant and outstanding as an orchid in an empty valley. When it was her turn, the 6 kunai flew towards the target one after another amidst a series of jingling sounds as if they were alive. A neat trembling sound actually left a neat concentric circle in the target's eye. This kind of exquisite control over subtle forces is simply astonishing. The end of the assessment also means the end of get out of class. Aoi recorded the assessment results in a notebook and carefully wrote down his evaluation of each person. Finally, the evaluation accumulated over the past 6 months will be presented to Hokage's desk as a piece of paper. Hey, Kinosuke, let's go eat barbecue together. Minato pulled Kushina along. After half a year of getting along, Konosuke and Minato have become quite familiar with each other. After all, someone who is familiar with the future plot will naturally know how important it is to have a good relationship in the future fourth generation. Have you seen that girl? Someone asked knowingly. Hyuga Yukirin. Minato murmured the name. She has the surname Hyuga. It is said that she can freely turn on the Byakugan before entering school. She was once called a genius by teacher Ao. Then he smiled and said, "What? Are you interested in her? This is not your usual style." Kushina on the side suddenly showed an expression of 8 trigrams. Does Konosuke like her? This sentence is quite a bit like a husband and a wife. Although the relationship between Kushina and Minato has become closer and closer in the past 6 months, it is unclear when exactly they got together. Is this due to the huge inertia of the plot? Why would I be interested in that kind of girl who has not yet completed her development? Someone hurriedly revealed his identity. As an adult, he would never allow himself to spread any scandals. And, from the looks of her, she should be from the Hyuga branch house. Konosuke clearly saw a neji-like bandage wrapped around the girl's forehead. Is he another poor person whose fate has been determined by his boring family? However, Konosuke did not notice that the expressions of Minato and Minato opposite him suddenly became subtle, and they looked at him hurriedly. Really, what about branch house? A cold voice came from behind. He saw a pretty girl standing behind him, and her distinctive white eyes were exuding an icy chill. What about branch house? She continued. A trace of cold sweat broke out on Konosuke's forehead. After all, he was caught red-handed saying bad things behind his back. This in itself was an immoral act. Come on, the girl said calmly, her slender body facing Konosuke. I'll show you the strength of the so-called branch house. No, girl, you start a fight over a disagreement. By the way, I don't hit women. Someone was about to refuse righteously, but before he could speak, a palm hit him. Ah, hey, what are you doing? Konosuke jumped away quickly, then waved his hand and said, I won't fight you. Stop talking nonsense. A cold voice came, and then a strand of black hair flashed in the air. In just a moment, the girl's figure appeared behind Konosuke, 8 trigrams 64 palms. Is it such a powerful move right from the start? It has to be said that even in the branch house, Hyuga Schwerin is still a genius. Her fierce moves are quick and natural, and she is no less powerful than Neji, who will take the Chunin exam in the future plot. Therefore, Konosuke, who did not fight back at all, was beaten beyond recognition on the spot, and acupuncture points all over his body were also tapped. Don't look too miserable. Girl, let me tell you, if I hadn't beaten women. No matter what, he still wanted to save face, and a feeble explanation came out from the face that was swollen from being beaten. However, all that was left to him was a slender figure and disdainful words, like trash. Due to someone's accidental injury, the barbecue was not finished after all. Someone who was sent back to his residence by Minato and Kushina seemed to be suffering a little, depressed but very helpless. Who the hell did I provoke? Fortunately, Orochimaru did not return, so someone finally let out a sigh of relief. The greater the ability, the greater the responsibility, and the more things have to be endured. As a Hokage apprentice and one of the Sannin, Orochimaru seemed to have been performing tasks non-stop during World War II. Now this man's eyes have fallen on the position called Hokage, and he is working hard for it, but no one can say for sure whether he is suitable to be Hokage. Nowadays, Konosuke is guarding the huge house and living an empty life every day. After a long time, he feels very comfortable. Someone first changed into casual clothes, then started to make a table of simple meals and ate by himself. He was injured now, but he was in urgent need of supplies. Not long after, Konosuke quickly swept away the food. However, as time passed, his cheek that had been beaten into a pig's head slowly swelled, and finally miraculously returned to its original shape. Then someone became accustomed to it and began to engage in intense practice. Puff, throw it casually and hit the target. 1, 2, 3. After practicing for more than an hour, not once did he fall outside the target. This was the result of half a year of hard training, because Konosuke discovered that the speed of the fusion of the Life Star was closely related to his daily hard training and his own strength. In recent days, he has found that he has become more and more proficient in using Galen's various skills, and the power fluctuations from the depths of his soul are getting stronger and stronger. Some skills can be released by himself without consuming sacrifice points. Although limited by his own weak body, the power of these skills has been reduced to an extremely low level. But at least they belong to you, right? This can't help but make Konosuke feel that the first Destiny Star is about to be successfully fused. If the fusion of Fate Star is successful, what he will get is not just the free use rights of those few skills, but he will be able to pick up everything about Galen and use it at will. He can use some of the things in the game and some that are not mentioned in the game. He can use it too. Many people overlook Garen as a free hero, but as the power of Demacia, he has his own strengths. Konosuke inherited a lot from him: powerful sword skills, transcendent recovery ability, damage-reducing shield, gorgeous crit rotation and the final killer move. Perhaps due to copycats, these abilities have been more or less tampered with, especially the final move. Justice from Heaven. Gather a great sword of energy to slash the enemy. The heavier the damage to the attacked party, the greater the damage bonus. In addition, the more people the attacked party kills, the more critical hits they will receive. It has to be said that this is simply a killing trick, and who in the Hokage world doesn't have a few lives in his hands? But this move is simply the nemesis of those who are full of evildoers. It is precisely because of the special performance of this move that Konosuke was able to leapfrog and kill Jonin and even Chunin with his thin body that could not even condense chakra. After practicing shuriken throwing, Konosuke began his regular physical training. Push-ups, sit-ups, stone dumbbells. He would force himself to perform any exercise that was helpful to enhance his physical fitness. After each exercise, he needed to eat another meal to recover from his tired body, but he could not rely on food to relieve mental fatigue. Recover. After finishing his routine physical exercise, Kazuki took a shower to wash away the sweat from his body, and then went into the kitchen to prepare meals. It was like this every day, in a constant cycle, and he didn't know when there would be changes. After all, half a year is neither long nor short. After finishing a table of meals, Konosuke raised his weak arms and took a big mouthful of rice. After eating half of the meal, the pain all over his body slowly weakened due to the resilience brought by his passive skill Tenacity. Tenacity. After the host is out of combat, it can quickly repair its own losses based on the nutritional content of the food it ingests. Konosuke cannot understand the particularity of these abilities, but this does not prevent him from using them. It is this characteristic that allows him to persist step by step. As a result, his appetite is now surprisingly large. After all, forcing him to perform high-load training regardless of his body's endurance will cause great damage to his body. The energy brought by the food to the body is very sufficient. Konosuke can feel that there is an inexplicable life energy in his body that is slowly and continuously repairing his body, and the muscles injured due to high-load exercise are being repaired. Not only did he slowly recover, but he also became stronger than before. Konosuke felt that he could crush a chicken to death right now. Snapped. While Konosuke was still devouring his food, a slight noise suddenly came from the entrance. Are you back? Konosuke hurried to the entrance, but happened to see Orochimaru, who was still changing his shoes. Are you still training? The plain tone revealed indifference. Orochimaru turned his head and looked at Konosuke, who was slightly breathing heavily. He was not surprised. Just being idle and bored. Are you just bored? Orochimaru looked at the sky outside, then pondered for a moment. By the way, you can already refine chakra, right? Did Uncle Snake actually see it? Someone nodded. In fact, he felt that refining chakra was not difficult. Then it's time to continue assigning tasks to you. This sentence is like the sound of nature, and someone feels happy when he hears it. Recently, he has been worrying about the sacrifice points needed to merge with the Destiny Star. Uncle Snake clearly brought a pillow when he was dozing off. So have you tested the properties of your chakra? Uncle Snake turned a deaf ear to someone's hopeful gaze, but took out a piece of chakra paper as if he had expected it. Is this necessary? Is it too early to test chakra properties? Someone took the chakra paper and input a certain amount of chakra casually. Then the paper began to wrinkle slightly, then the outside was cut into two pieces, and then a flame burst out and burned slowly. Thunder, wind, fire. Chakra with 3 attributes is not very common. Orochimaru frowned slightly, and then handed out a scroll. This contains the chakra refining experience and some commonly used ninjutsu. You should practice it carefully recently, and I will notify you in advance when a task is needed. After hearing this, Konosuke opened the scroll. After coming to the Hokage world for so many years, he was already familiar with fonts and other things. He saw that it was densely written with everything from refining chakra to special analysis of various seals to analysis of the principles of various ninjutsu, and then there are some commonly used ninjutsu seal techniques. Konosuke couldn't help but his eyes lit up, but the cool image of his future self, Reikiri on his left hand and Rasengan on his right hand, already appeared in his mind. As spring passes and summer comes, at the end of autumn and winter comes, the old trees gain new growth rings, the grass reappears, and the bleak flowers begin to bloom again. Time follows people's expectations, sometimes like a rushing river, sometimes like a bicycle passing by quietly with its crisp ringtone. For Konosuke, time is like standing still. He almost repeats it every day. With the same action, when he came back to his senses, he was already powerful. Day after day, year after year, under the silent attention of many eyes, Konosuke has grown rapidly from the moment he came into contact with chakra. In the past 2 years, the information presented to Hokage about Konosuke has been constantly changing. For Orochimaru's nominal adopted son, Sarutobi has witnessed with his own eyes the amazing changes in Konosuke. The exquisite chakra control, the diverse use of chakra, and the strange blood inheritance limit. Has he actually started being assigned tasks by Orochimaru now? Sarutobi couldn't help but feel shocked when he saw the intelligence about the completion of various missions secretly carried out by Konosuke. Most of them were pursuit and assassination missions, including people from Genin and others to Chunin, and one especially Jonin. If he hadn't been monitoring Konosuke, Sarutobi would have even suspected that Konosuke's rapid growth was secretly taught by Orochimaru, but in fact, it was not the case. The reason was that Konosuke finally merged with the first Destiny Star during his continuous missions, causing his body to undergo earth-shaking changes. Although his physical body is still weak, the complete integration of Galen's Life Star has greatly strengthened his mental power. This gave him greater control over chakra. Orochimaru, you really brought back an incredible child. But now that he is killing prematurely at such an early age, I'm afraid. Every time Sarutobi looks at the updated information, he can't help but admire it. Call out. Suddenly, a figure flashed and appeared quietly in front of the desk. Sarutobi was not surprised at all. The person who came was wearing a black tight-fitting outfit and a mask on his face, but he was Anbu, the Hokage's direct subordinate. Master Hokage, there is news that Master Jiraiya has returned to the village. The Anbu lowered his head and bowed slightly. After the report, he said no more and immediately turned into a black shadow and disappeared. Hearing the news that Jiraiya was back, Sarutobi was slightly startled, but then he smiled lightly and said, coming back at this time, well, the time is just right. However, in the ninja school, someone was yawning loudly and sitting boredly behind the desk, feeling drowsy while listening to Aoi's eloquent scientific remarks on the podium. By the way, I went on a mission last night and fought with the opponent for 300 rounds, so I can't pick up the energy today. Hyuga, who was sitting in the front row, glanced at such a scene from the corner of her eye as her beautiful eyes flickered, and she couldn't help but lower her evaluation of someone a little bit again. The graduation exam is about to take place. Every lecture contains extremely critical content, yet this person is so lazy. Is he really just a lazy waste? The disdain is palpable. After class, the black man came straight to Konosuke and said, waste is waste after all. The graduation exam is about to take place. How can you become a genin in such a state? For some reason, ever since that harsh lesson was given to Hinosuke, Hyuga Schwerin likes to cause trouble for him from time to time. Someone curled his lips helplessly, saying, girl, have you found a new excuse to teach me a lesson? Whether I succeed or not, Jonin, is none of your business. The clay figurine is still earthy, let alone me. Let me tell you, I am made of meat. I don't know how many genins have died in my hands. Someone made a retort that seemed to be harsh, but the weak expression on his face was not convincing at all. Oh, just you. Come with me. The girl's slender figure walked straight past. Minato and Kushina on the side looked at the two of them, wondering whether Konosuke was going to be beaten again. The two people who have long been accustomed to this are very happy to hear and see this. Hey, am I afraid of you? Now that I have mastered the unparalleled magical skill of subduing a dragon with 10 slaps, girl, prepare to be slapped in the face. Someone left confidently. After a while, the girl returned with a proud look on her face, as if she had gained great satisfaction. Every time she beats Konosuke, the pressure from her family will be greatly relieved. Hyuga Schwerin may be obsessed with this feeling now. Really, looking at the person who followed after him, who was beaten with a bruised nose and face, Minato and the two secretly sighed in their hearts. This pair seemed to be enemies. But having said that, Konosuke has a special constitution. He will probably recover immediately after eating something, right? It was precisely for this reason that Hyuga Schwerin beat him without any scruples. Day to day. One day, the day for the graduation of this class of students finally arrived. In class, Aoi put on a zombie face and tried hard to maintain her weak image. She put her hands on the podium and looked at the young students in the classroom who were beginning to take off their clothes. She said in a cold voice, "After today, you are just the same. A ninja." Even at the last moment, this man didn't even want to put on a smile. Here is the class breakdown. Someone will pick you up later. Not even a congratulation, not even willing to read out the class placement list, Aoi put the class placement list on the blackboard with his backhand. At the last moment of separation, he glanced at the students in the classroom and said nothing more. He turned around and walked out of the classroom neatly. Don't die easily, you. The moment he walked out of the classroom, Aoi sighed slightly in his blue eyes. Ninjas themselves are existences wandering on the edge of life and death. The more powerful they are, the greater the danger they face. In this still turbulent period, even Genin will not be absolutely safe. Now that World War II is not over, it is understandable that these children may face the fate of entering the battlefield after graduation. In the classroom, after Aoi left, most people rushed towards the class division list posted on the blackboard. After graduation, Genin was divided into groups of 3, led by a Jonin. The class division list did not indicate the name of the leading teacher, so everyone did not know who their leading teacher was. Konosuke didn't look at the class schedule. He looked at the playground outside the window with his chin on his chin. He was told something in advance that he might not be able to become a teammate with anyone. Kushina looked up at the list with her name written on it, and the name at the front made her extremely happy. Namikaze Minato. 3 years is enough to change any relationship. The power of the plot is that it seems to be an invisible hand, slowly but firmly pulling the fate of Kushina and Minato together. Since Minato and I are in the same group, what about Konosuke? Kushina was a little confused. However, after searching carefully, she did not find Konosuke's name on the list. Is this guy really unable to graduate? Kushina was shocked and hurriedly wanted to look at the list again, when a voice suddenly came. Kushina, from today on, we are teammates. Kushina, who was rubbing her forehead, suddenly heard a timid voice in her ear. She turned her head and looked, but it was a shy boy wearing glasses. When he saw Kushina's gaze, the boy's face actually, Yihong even dodges her eyes. Seeing Kushina looking over, the boy's eyes dodged for a while, as if he wanted to lower his head to avoid Kushina's gaze. Well, please give me more advice in the future. Resisting the urge to run away, the boy's voice trembled slightly. Kushina remembers that this boy's name is Senjoichi. He is introverted and not suitable for fighting, but he has special talents in medical treatment. However, all the guys who will do logistics in the future have graduated, and Konosuke can't even compare to him. Is there something wrong? Kushina couldn't help but look at Konosuke with deep doubts. Snapped. A pair of white and tender palms slapped the table hard, and Konosuke couldn't help but raise his head, but he met a pair of angry eyes. Asshole, what on earth do you think? Seeing someone's cheeky look, Hyuga couldn't help but feel angry. What do you think? Someone was a little overwhelmed by the girl's unreasonable anger. By the way, have you found an excuse to beat me up again? Today is graduation day. I'm afraid I'm going to get beaten up badly. Someone was thinking this in his mind, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead for no reason. Didn't you think of the consequences? Hyuga Schwerin shouted loudly, pointing to the list, but she was a little excited. In this world of the jungle, the weak means that the fate will be firmly in the hands of others. You now that you can't even do genin, don't you have some ideas in your heart? The girl's anger was vented. She obviously hated Kinosuke, but for some reason her heart became confused when she saw that Kinosuke's name was not on the list. A sense of loss slowly filled her heart, as if she suddenly knew that a companion who had always struggled with her could no longer accompany her to the end. Looking at the serious face of Hyuga Schwerin, Kinosuke was a little confused. Girl, are you making a mistake? Who says I can't graduate? Just because my name is not on the list, it doesn't mean I can't become genin. Are you still arrogant? Hyuga had already adapted to someone's insistence on saving face, and scolded, if your name is not on the list, you have not led Jonin. How can you become a genin without leading Jonin? Who said I didn't lead the team Jonin? The weak words came out of someone's mouth like sophistry, but in Hyuga Schwerin's ears, there was a sense of lack of confidence. Quibble, snapped. There was another sound of slamming on the table, and the girl seemed to be really angry. Kinosuke, can you speak properly? Regarding someone who killed several genin today and several chunin yesterday, Hyuga Schwerin felt like his ears were ringing with pain. Why can't this guy be more pragmatic? A deep look of disappointment flashed through Hyuga's eyes. Even people like me, whose fate has been decided, have not given up. How can you give up? Some people's destiny has been directly determined since they were born, and is firmly in the hands of others. No matter how hard they work and struggle, they can't escape the determined fact, as if it is engraved deep in their souls. No matter how much you struggle, you can't get rid of it. Just like Hyuga, the Zong family is always so aloof, and the branch house is always groveling like ordinary servants. Kinosuke, you are different from me. You are free. As long as your destiny is still in your own hands, you need to fight and struggle. Hold it firmly in your hands and never let go. Shui Ran, who is a member of the Hyuga branch house, especially hates people who are obviously talented and can work hard but do nothing. For example, Kinosuke, this boy obviously has talents beyond ordinary people, but he yawns every morning and never wakes up. Even in practical classes, he just throws a few kunai away. Bragging all day and dreaming about killing chunin in the middle of the night. Kinosuke, it's time to wake up from the dream. Looking at the expression of the girl in front of him, who seemed to contain everything in her eyes, Kinosuke couldn't bear it and smiled helplessly. Everything I said is true. Girl, you have to believe me. Chapter 11. Slowly the class division came to an end. Genin, who graduated from the same class, was quickly taken away by the leader Jonin, who came one by one. There were only 7 students left in the classroom, namely Minato and Hyuga's teams. Needless to say, Minato's teammates are Kushina and Shijoichi. Not surprisingly, their team leader Jonin is most likely Jiraiya, but I don't know if Jiraiya has taught Nagato and the 3 of them are back. Hyuga Schwerin's teammates are 2 boys. One is named Gang Yuensho. He is very strong, with dark skin and simple features. He looks very reliable. The other is named Shueyun. He is a bit handsome, but cold and arrogant. It seems to be worth 258,000 yuan, but he has the capital to be proud, because the fan behind him represents everything, the Uchiha clan, the clan who committed Chunabu in the later plot and tried to challenge a village. Kinosuke has no impression of these people, at least he has not seen them appear at the beginning of the later plot. Probably died during World War II or World War III. Looking at them with a little excitement and expectation, Kinosuke, who had no feelings for them, thought with malice. But when his eyes passed over Hyuga Schwerin, his eyes concealed a hint of worry. What are you looking at the end of the crane over there? A cold and proud voice came from the side, but Shueyun keenly caught Kinosuke's malicious gaze. I remember your name wasn't even on the list. Should I say he is worthy of the Uchiha clan? Someone curled his lips helplessly. Sorry, I'm waiting for someone. Waiting for someone. A trace of disdain flashed across Shueyun's stern face. You can wait outside. What an idiot. Kinosuke frowned, but didn't want to pay any more attention to him. You. A burst of anger burst out in Shueyun's eyes. When he was about to stand up, he was stopped by a jade hand that suddenly stretched out from the side. Stop. The cold words came out of Hyuga Schwerin's mouth, but they contained a hint of hostility. His slender figure was ready to go. Shueyun even had a feeling that if he took another step forward, he might suffer some fatal consequences. Consequence. I'm afraid it's crazy to fight the Hyuga clan in close combat. Shueyun, who was well aware of the current situation, couldn't help but snorted and sat down slowly, but when he looked at Kinnisuke, he couldn't help but look at him with a hint of resentment and hatred. Time passed slowly, but fortunately, this group of people seemed to be the quiet kind, and they were not angry because of the procrastination of the leading teacher. Of course, compared to others, Kushina was different. She first showed impatience and complained several times. Minato just smiled softly from the side, while Kinnisuke continued to stare at the playground outside the window in a daze. Snapped. After waiting for a long time, the door suddenly opened. A handsome man with a pale face walked in. As soon as Orochimaru entered the classroom, he saw Kinnisuke in the corner and walked straight to where they were. Lord, Orochimaru-sama. Gang Motosho suddenly opened his eyes. He had no idea that his leading teacher would be Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. He didn't know whether the emotion that burst out at that moment was fear or excitement. Hyuga Schwerin was also stunned. It was said that Orochimaru never led Jonin. Shueyun, on the other hand, showed a smile as he should have at the corner of his mouth, and at the same time glanced at Kinnisuke and gave him a look of contempt. However, just when he was about to stand up proudly, Orochimaru bypassed them and walked straight to Kinnisuke in the back row. Come with me. You are late, Orochimaru-sama. I encountered some things on the way, and I was talking while walking. The two of them then walked straight out the door without even looking at Shueyun. How could this happen? Shueyun clenched his fists unwillingly, his eyes filled with angry flames. Hyuga Schwerin also opened his eyes in surprise, staring blankly at Kinnisuke, who followed Orochimaru to the classroom door, and his heart suddenly became quite complicated. It turns out everything he said is true. Snapped. Just as Orochimaru walked to the door, the classroom door was forcefully opened with a loud noise. When the door was opened, the smell of alcohol, which was not very strong, came first, which made Orochimaru frown slightly. After he looked at the person clearly, a trace of helplessness and indifference flashed in his eyes. Jiraiya. There was a calmness in the slightly hoarse voice, and it seemed that he was not surprised at all by Jiraiya's appearance. In fact, Orochimaru didn't know that Jiraiya would return today. Orochimaru. Jiraiya was slightly startled when he saw Orochimaru, and then smiled. What a coincidence. As he said that, his eyes drifted towards the child behind Orochimaru. When he saw Kinnisuke, who looked neither sad nor happy at this time, his eyes stopped for a long time, a little dazed. This child's eyes looked quite like Orochimaru's, with the same indifference. Looking back at Kinnisuke, Jiraiya raised an eyebrow and asked, "Are you also leading the team?" Orochimaru looked at Kinnisuke behind him and said calmly, "That's not really true. I'm just picking up the things I kept at school." After saying that, he took a step forward. Seeing this, Jiraiya subconsciously turned his body sideways to let Orochimaru come out. Kinnisuke followed closely, but he had a look of helplessness on his face. "Uncle Snake, it's fine if you show off, but there's no need to show off to me, right? Am I a thing?" There seems to be something wrong with saying that. Kinnisuke pondered. Jiraiya stood in the corridor, stroking his chin and looking at Orochimaru's back with a thoughtful look on his face. Daughter, you Lord Jiraiya." A crisp voice suddenly sounded, stopping Jiraiya from thinking. Looking in the direction of the sound, she saw a timid girl. "Are you our leading teacher?" "That's right." Jiraiya nodded, not making a fuss about his reputation. He is far less frivolous than he was later. Hearing Jiraiya's answer, Kushina and the three of them all had happy faces. "Before, I was envious of Kinnisuke and the others because their teacher was Orochimaru, but I didn't expect that my teacher would be Jiraiya, who is also one of the Sannin." Looking at Jiraiya, Minato's eyes also revealed the light of yearning. "I sighed secretly in my heart, Kinnisuke, now we are on the same starting line again." Sensing Minato's gaze, Jiraiya pretended not to notice, but was thinking about what the teacher had said before coming. Namikaze Minato, a rare genius and his future student, the legendary child of prophecy. He knew very well that the teacher wanted him to train Minato to become the mainstay of Konoha and become an existence like him. What about Orochimaru? Does he also have a special mission? Is he the child with a cold expression and a temperament similar to Orochimaru's when he was a child? With this question, Jiraiya took Minato and the others to start a routine assessment. After Jiraiya led Minato and others, Hyuga Schwerin and their team leader Jonin arrived too late. After a series of self-introductions and assessments, time has flown by. Hyuga walked aimlessly, still thinking about the scene where Konosuke was taken away by Orochimaru just now. Why did Orochimaru-sama take him away alone? Hyuga Schwerin became more and more confused as she thought about it. Could he be telling the truth? How can it be? Thinking of Hinosuke who was beaten by him before, Hyuga Schwerin immediately rejected this ridiculous idea. Ding, ding ding. A faint collision of kunai was heard. Hyuga looked up and looked around, and found that he had arrived outside a training ground unknowingly. Why is there anyone here at this time? With deep doubts, she opened her eyes, and then she saw a scene that shocked her heart. Time turned back, and after Konosuke followed Orochimaru out of the classroom, he was taken to a training ground. Do we need to play the self-introduction game again? Orochimaru turned his head, with a hint of joking in the corner of his mouth. No, Konosuke waved his hand casually. The two of them have been together for so long, and they probably know what they should know better than anyone else. Orochimaru knows his secrets, but he also knows everything about Orochimaru. He was very clear about Orochimaru's purpose of bringing him here, probably to test how much he had grown in the past 3 years, right? Orochimaru looked at Konosuke deeply, his eyes were calm, and he said calmly, "You should know what I want to do. In that case, let's get started. If your performance cannot satisfy me, then you will have no value at all." Hearing what Orochimaru said, Konosuke's eyes flashed with pain. What happens if there is no value anymore? Will you use it for experiments? Facing Konosuke's strange eyes, Orochimaru looked calm and said in a hoarse voice, "Restrict my movements, attack secretly, use your blood succession limit, even kill me, you don't mind now. There is only one thing to consider, and that is to defeat me, there is no need to worry about other factors." What the calm voice tells is the ultimate indifferent reality. Konosuke stared at Orochimaru with strange eyes. He thought it would take some time for Orochimaru to completely turn to the dark side, but it seemed that Uncle Snake was not far away from returning to his true nature. This is just an assessment. Is it necessary to go to this level? But since Uncle Snake said so, Konosuke did not hesitate. Besides, he didn't think he had the ability to kill Orochimaru. The only thing he could do was to try any method with all his strength. Because what Orochimaru needs is to see their value in this process. Konosuke lifted the kunai and rushed straight towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru looked at Konosuke rushing over silently, and took out a kunai. What a stupid choice. Now that Konosuke has fully integrated the Star of Galen, as a leader of Demacia, Galen's swordsmanship is only suitable for face-to-face attacks, and other hiding and sneak attacks will only affect his full performance. Konosuke's free hand quickly pinched a few pieces of shuriken from the item bag, and using both hands together, he threw the kunai and shuriken towards Orochimaru. Several shurikens rotated rapidly in the air, drawing 3 different arcs and flying in the same direction, while the kunai flew straight forward. Clang, clang, clang. Orochimaru swung his kunai, accurately hitting 3 shurikens and 1 kunai without wasting any extra movement. Then the kunai stabbed straight at him, and after a series of sharp and non-fancy moves, the two were already fighting together. Not bad taijutsu. Orochimaru exerted a little force on his hands and easily resisted the blow that stabbed his vital parts. He commented in his mouth without stopping at all, as if he had turned into soft body. His whole arm was as dexterous as a snake, but it was in an instant, he stretched around Konosuke's front and inserted the sharp kunai straight into his back. Although Konosuke has now perfectly integrated with Galen's destiny, his weak body greatly limits the power of the inherited taijutsu. Coupled with Jonin's lack of experience in school battles, a crisis emerges at this moment. However, when the kunai was about to be inserted into Konosuke's back, the blood splash that should have occurred did not appear. Instead, there was only a bang sound, and a burst of smoke emitted from Konosuke's entire body, and a wooden stake appeared in the smoke. Faintly visible. At the same time, Konosuke appeared not far behind Orochimaru with a handful of pain in his hand, staring closely at Orochimaru. This exciting duel between the two also greatly reflects the speed of Konosuke's current growth. Body replacement technique. After seeing the wooden stake, Orochimaru was not surprised at all. He jumped up as if he had already realized it, caught the kunai flying from behind with his bare hands, and then landed safely. With good physical skills and a high level of reflexes, the body replacement technique can be applied very quickly. I almost didn't notice it. Orochimaru looked at Konosuke silently and said his own evaluation at the same time. It seems that school has made you grow a lot. A ninja who can truly use ninjutsu in actual combat is a qualified ninja. It is also true that the ninjutsu taught in the ninja school only has a few basic ones, and none of them are very offensive. The only ninjutsu taught in the ninja school is the basic golden binding technique, escape technique and three-body technique. Among them, the three-body techniques are clone technique, body replacement technique, and transformation technique. These three ninjutsu do not have offensive power, so although Konosuke's chakra amount has now faintly exceeded genin level, they do not have offensive ninjutsu. As an auxiliary, the best strategy is to maximize the attack methods that highlight physical skills. However, this is just an appetizer. What he is showing now is just the result of his usual hard training. Now he does not use the power of the life star because he wants to test what level he has reached now. Although he usually fights Genin Chunin, but how can an opponent of that level compare to a ninja who has experienced many battles like Orochimaru? He has already lit up his second destiny star and has a trump card. Now he is eager to test his strength. He trains day after day and faces pressure-free opponents in the ninja school assessment. These cannot reflect the results at all. In the end, he just played house with the children, throwing a kunai around. As for being beaten into a pig's head by Hyuga Schwerin, it was just to improve his resistance and recovery ability. Although Minato can accomplish this task perfectly, please forgive a grown man's unwarranted self-esteem. Who would find a man to be beaten specifically if you leave a beautiful woman with no scruples at all? And for the powerful hitting ability of taijutsu, no one is more proficient than Hyuga Schwerin from Hyuga. Konosuke's upper body leaned forward, like a cheetah lying on its body and sprinting. Nice eyes. Orochimaru admired the look in his eyes during the attack, but his movements were still too immature, so straight and straight, without any false moves. Such an attack would be like losing his life, especially if it was a frontal attack. Konosuke, who made such a move, naturally understood this truth. But, have you ever seen Galen take a serpentine route in battle? The coquettish movement is not suitable for me now. Seeing Orochimaru still standing there, Konosuke's explosive force from his legs set off waves of sand mist on the sand. When he was about to reach his body, he waved his arm and threw a kunai towards Orochimaru's face. Aha! Orochimaru tilted his head expressionlessly, as if he could see the trajectory of the kunai, and easily turned the kunai into a black shadow and shot past his neck into the woods. At this time, Konosuke was already close, and he shrank down in front of Orochimaru. Under Orochimaru's gaze, he put his hands on the ground and used the reaction force to use his strongest right leg to kick Orochimaru's chin with even greater force. Go! Although an attack of this magnitude could be easily avoided, Orochimaru still chose to resist in order to test Konosuke's strength. Konosuke's right leg came with a strong kick, and Orochimaru blocked Konosuke's kick with his hands. Bang! The moment the powerful force came from his palm, Orochimaru realized that he had underestimated Konosuke's strength, and was kicked away by the kick amid flying sand and dust. The strength isn't bad either. Orochimaru, who was in midair, had a look of surprise in his eyes. Before he could think about it, a wave of heat suddenly hit him. Orochimaru turned around and saw a strong flame coming towards him in the dust mist. Have you mastered this ninjutsu? Orochimaru looked calm, but the fireball that hit his face did not make him frown at all. Use the soft sand to confuse your vision, and then use ninjutsu to attack. But it's a good tactic. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Orochimaru, who was in midair, formed seals with his hands instantly, opened his mouth and blew out a blast of wind towards the flying fireball. The howling wind instantly dispersed the flames, and then blew them towards Konosuke on the ground. Call. The strong wind came in an instant. In a hurry, someone stabilized his body, adjusted his posture in the strong wind, and landed safely. However, just as he landed, a kunai flew towards him. Konosuke curled his lips. Before the kunai could reach him, he saw a faint flash of golden light and a small transparent shield appeared. Like an invisible wall, it blocked the kunai with a clang. Swipe. As the kunai flew around, it was firmly caught by a hand and held in his hand. Kinnisuke folded up a tougher branch on the side, and then tied the kunai firmly to it. I weighed it lightly with my hands. Although the center of gravity was a bit unbalanced, it could still be used as a sword. It's time to show your true skills. Someone weighed the branches, but rushed straight towards Orochimaru. Finally, have you used your blood inheritance limit again? Kinnisuke. Orochimaru sighed inwardly, but there was a little more fighting spirit in his eyes. The two entered into a confrontational state again. The real duel is about to begin. Someone has no fear, his eyes are calm and he whispers some kind of slogan, but his hands are not stopping. This time he does not do any protection, it is a completely offensive style. Facing the kunai stabbed, or being killed, his invisible shield bounces away, or he uses his own body to catch it. Hyuga, who was passing by at this time, looked blankly at Kinnisuke, who actually tied with Orochimaru, and the shock in his heart was beyond words. Although in her eyes, Kinnisuke seems to be in a state of being beaten all the time, it is already a miracle that he can last so long under the hands of Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. The kunai in Orochimaru's hand traced strange and graceful curves. Amidst a series of jingling sounds, although it was sometimes bounced away strangely, it also brought out alluring blood flowers on Kinnisuke's body from time to time. Unlike Hyuga, who was watching the battle from the sidelines and was surprised, Orochimaru during the duel had a deeper understanding of Hayanosuke's changes. He didn't understand what kind of blood inheritance limit this was. It was superb and not like any other taijutsu in the ninja world. Dehei, a small energy shield that is looming but can always withstand fatal blows at critical moments. In Orochimaru's eyes, this does not conform to any existing energy system in the ninja world that he knows, and it is like a new and unexplored field. In fact, that rainy night was what he felt when he saw Kinnisuke's blood inheritance beyond the limits of ordinary people. In fact, this was probably the fundamental reason why he decided to take him back to Konoha. Thinking of this, Orochimaru's eyes became more interested. Let me experience your differences. Seeing Uncle Snake getting more and more excited as he fought, Kinnisuke secretly complained. He knew in his heart that in this situation, the only thing he could fight for was his super defense and strong recovery ability. As for the trump card of the second life star, it is better not to use it. After all, no one knows whether Orochimaru will dissect him and study it after seeing it. Finally, after a period of time, Orochimaru was stabbed under someone's desperate attack. With a bang, it turned into a burst of white mist. After the white mist dissipated, only a confused face was left. Clone. Kinnisuke looked at the white mist and said he couldn't accept it. Uncle Snake is so powerful. Just a clone almost knocked him down. Thinking of this, Kinnisuke's face became slightly ugly. Your progress is pretty good. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded from behind, and Kinnisuke turned around suddenly, only to see Orochimaru standing behind him with a calm expression. Orochimaru just looked at him indifferently. The purpose of this assessment was to test how far Kinnisuke had grown in the past 3 years. However, he was still very satisfied with the results. Although what he saw was not everything, it was enough. In the future, you can take on tasks based on your own wishes. After saying a cold word, Orochimaru didn't even explain, and disappeared in a flash. However, the sudden glance before disappearing made Hyuga, who was watching the battle secretly, feel his heart skip a beat. He felt like he was being raped. The feeling of discovery. Kinnisuke curled his lips and reached out to touch the scars all over his body. Since it was a test, Orochimaru didn't hit hard. Now that he has been away from the battle for a while, some of the wounds covered by bloodline have begun to heal. But that's not the point. I managed to fuse Galen's life star with great difficulty. I was so messed up and finally got to the point where I was showing off, but I just blew up a shadow clone and even injured myself. This is a bit unhelpful. But it's a bit unrealistic to say that you want to defeat Orochimaru just based on this. Today's battle taught Kinnisuke a real lesson, that is, he is not strong enough. Now that I can barely defeat even one of Orochimaru's clones, what about the likes of Pain Six Paths, Uchiha Obito and the like in the future? Not to mention Uchiha Madara and Kagaya Haim. Orochimaru's last words are undoubtedly an affirmation. If you can choose freely, the various tasks that follow will be your period of rapid development. After all, the fusion speed of the Destiny Star is directly linked to your own strength. Li Shuangxi, you can do it. Someone secretly cheered for himself, but he smiled and said hello in the direction where Hyuga was standing, and then hurried away. He found me. Hyuga stood stunned, feeling as if the world had undergone earth-shaking changes. The boy he could once beat up at will was now the one who could forcefully destroy Orochimaru-sama's clone. Could everything he said before be true? But since he has such strength, why doesn't he fight back? Hyuga Schwerin was in a state of confusion for a moment. Looking at Kinnisuke leaving, he didn't know what he was thinking. This night, Kinnisuke is still undergoing high-intensity training. Due to the special characteristics of his body, the amount of training he performs every day is definitely beyond the imagination of Hyuga Schwerin and Gang Yuensho. They may have seen Kinnisuke's powerful shining points, but they also ignoring Kinnisuke's efforts that are no less than anyone else's. It was late at night, and in the yard where the old trees stood, a boy was like a robot, lifting a huge and heavy stone barbell and repeating mechanical movements. Under the bright moonlight, only heavy breathing could be heard. Other than that, outside, there is only silence. Kinnisuke's upward movement of the barbell suddenly stopped, he inhaled and exhaled, and after squeezing the air out of his lungs, he slowly lowered the heavy barbell to relieve his arms that were almost overloaded by intense training. In fact, many years ago, ever since the passive skill allowed him to be on standby with sufficient food, Kinnisuke exercised like a madman without worrying about the damage to his body caused by high-intensity training. There are only a handful of people in Konoha village who know about Kinnisuke's physique. This is different from the fact that the Akamaiki clan can convert the energy from food intake into chakra, but they can rely on the energy from food intake to use passive skills to restore the body's condition. This may make the Akamaiki clan nothing compares. Kinnisuke even has a feeling that with the subsequent improvement of the number of life stars fused and his own physique, this passive skill will become stronger and stronger, even terrifyingly powerful, and will not be weaker than those with big moves. After completing the boring training, Kinnisuke washed himself up, swallowed a lot of food, and then went to bed honestly. In the early morning, Kinnisuke opened his eyes and jumped out of bed neatly, stretched his limbs, and twisted his neck with satisfaction. Every day of high-intensity training does no harm to the body. Every time I wake up, not only am I more energetic, but my limbs are full of energy and become stronger. Suddenly there was a sound of wings flapping, and a scroll fell into his hands. Oh, has the mission application been authorized? Well, that's good. Let's start taking action tonight. Since the last encounter, Hyuga Schwerin has not seen Kinnisuke for a long time, but the scene at the training ground has always been lingering in her mind, and she cannot get rid of it for a long time. The night is as dark as ink, the sky and the earth are shrouded in darkness, clouds are surging, and there is no trace of moonlight. From time to time, a gust of wind roars past, rolling up the branches and leaves and making a shrill sound like a night owl. This is a camp hidden in the mountains, and it is also the location of their team's mission target. At this time, there were bandits lying on the ground around her, but she didn't spend much effort to deal with these ordinary people. Shui ran. A shout came, but it was Gang Yuensho from the same team. The strong body was stained with blood and soil, and he was probably injured in the battle just now. Hyuga Schwerin nodded lightly and looked at Gang Yuensho's wounds. It seemed that he had not yet gotten rid of the comfort of the ninja school, but with his strength, he should not be injured. After graduating from a ninja school like a greenhouse, they directly face this cruel world. Such a huge contrast makes some people extremely uncomfortable. There are no ninja battles here that are like playing house, and there are no fixed ninja battles. There are no moving wooden targets, and there are no bright classrooms where you can sit quietly and listen to lectures. There are only cruel human nature and bloody facts here. Anyone who cannot withstand this change will eventually be eliminated. Only the strong deserve to survive here. Gang Yuensho, you are too slow. We are just a few ordinary people, and you are still injured. A disdainful sneer came from the side, but it was Uchiha Shueyun with a cold face who sat on top of him. The tree overlooks Gang Yuensho below. Gang Yuensho's honest face couldn't help but blush, and he hesitated to defend, but was interrupted again by Uchiha Shueyun. It's been taking too long, we're going to start attacking the camp. But shouldn't we wait for Teacher Zelen to come with us? After all. No, I don't have time to waste with you. Uchiha Shueyun leisurely jumped down from the tree. You two can follow if you want. If you don't want to, it doesn't matter if you wait here. After all, I am enough for an enemy of that level. As he spoke, he jumped forward and rushed forward without waiting for Hyuga Schwerin and Gang Yuensho to reply. Hateful. Hyuga Schwerin and Gang Yuensho looked at each other, but both showed a trace of anger, and then they followed helplessly. Why did Teacher Zelen choose this arrogant man to be the squad leader? When Kinnisuke came to the foot of the mountain, he looked up at the star-studded sky and felt the cold wind blowing across his cheeks. He couldn't help but mutter to himself with some pretentiousness, "It's going to rain." His mission is to get rid of a Chunin hiding in this mountain forest camp. During World War II, there were not many fugitives who chose to escape because they saw the horror of the battlefield and were afraid of war. After all, there are all kinds of people in this world. They think they can live a good life by temporarily escaping the war and hiding their names. However, their title of Chunin is too dazzling. As long as they show some strength, the punishment from the village will come. However, there are some kind-hearted people who would rather never expose their strength and just live a stable life. It is not uncommon for Kinnisuke to see such people. Didn't you say that if you want to pass this mountain road, you must kill a certain number of robbers? Looking at the robbers lying on the ground at his feet, Kinnisuke really couldn't imagine which kind person did it. But it saved him a lot of time after all, didn't it? Today must be a good sign. With such a scene, it seems that there must be someone noble to help with this mission. Someone bared his teeth and was in a happy mood, trotting towards the top of the mountain. However, the scene before him as soon as he reached the top of the mountain made him give up this idea, and his joyful mood was wiped away. On an open space in front of the top of the mountain, wooden buildings were built against the mountain, facing the mountain clouds and mist, hidden in the green forest. What a blessed land, but within this blessed land, a large number of bandits were lying around. One of them, a middle-aged man, grabbed a young girl's throat with his fingers and stood outside the damaged wooden wall. Lying at their feet were two teenagers, one breathing heavily and the other. One person was lying motionless, but he didn't know whether he was dead or not. "Let that girl go." A loud cry came out of Kinnisuke's mouth and echoed through the forest. The breeze came slowly, blowing a strand of hair. Hyuga Schwerin, who was tightly grasped by the throat, struggled hard, but at this time, she was extremely regretful and resentful. Since they followed Uchiha Shueyun to the bandit camp, their mission went very smoothly at first. Unexpectedly, after cleaning up all the thieves and the three of them relaxed a little, a ninja with the Konoha rebel forehead protector suddenly came from the thieves who fell to the ground suddenly rose up, and in just a moment, Gang Yuensho and Uchiha Mizune were eliminated instantly. This is different from any enemy they have encountered before. It is very powerful, and may have reached the level of Chunin. Judging from the opponent's ruthless and decisive fighting style, this is no longer something that Genin, a rookie like them who just graduated from school and has not completed a few missions, can match. Just relying on the opponent's rich combat experience, I am afraid that they can be manipulated at will. But isn't this a simple mission to eliminate thieves? Why is there Chunin here? Feeling the hands tightening around her neck, Hyuga's breathing gradually began to quicken. Is this all we can do? She felt that her life was passing by bit, and various fragments began to appear in her mind, including the injustice of her family, the joy of the academy, and all the pictures couldn't help but begin to come together, and finally settled on a human face. Kinnisuke. A smile slowly appeared on Hyuga's lips. What is he doing now? The feeling of suffocation for too long made her feel dizzy, but she vaguely heard a clear loud shout. "Put that girl down, Kinnisuke." Hyuga suddenly opened his eyes, and when he turned his head, he happened to see someone wearing night clothes shouting seriously. Why is he here? Hyuga Schwerin was confused, but she felt the big hand holding her neck suddenly loosen, and then she fell to the ground. The long-lost air immediately came up to her, causing her to start breathing heavily involuntarily. Looking at the safe girl, Kinnisuke turned his eyes and faced the Chunin in front of him. Wearing a rough and dirty suede vest, black lining, black trousers, and a messy beard tangled together, furry around the face. His long life has made him look less like a ninja and more like a thief. Komodo Nanayaro. Kinosuke tentatively called out the name. He looked at the Chunin's face and the ridiculously thick hair again, and couldn't help but secretly sigh that he looked the same on the outside. Are you the ninja of Konoha again? A rich voice came from Pu Yuan's mouth, but there was a hint of sarcasm in the corner of his mouth. I've already hid here, aren't you willing to let me go? Pu Yuan became more and more angry as he spoke, and in the end he was almost hysterical. Escape from war, kill villagers for no reason, instigate thieves to rob passers-by. Kinosuke's voice was indifferent as he recounted the personal information attached to Pu Yuan in the mission letter. But the words became colder as he spoke. How dare a person like you, who is full of evildoers, speak like a victim? Bah, how shameless. Kinosuke was too lazy to talk nonsense with him anymore. He directly pulled out the ninja sword specially configured for the task and said calmly, "Stop talking nonsense, Your Excellency, just write it down. Be careful, the opponent is a Chunin. Run away." Hyuga couldn't help but remind her. Although she saw how powerful Kinosuke was that time, she still didn't think that Kinosuke would be his opponent. After all, the level of ninja was not it can be decided based on one item alone. She tried hard to stand up, but the previous battle had already exhausted her energy. At this time, she could only hope that Kinosuke could discover the opponent's strength in time and escape safely. Ha! It's too late. A voice came from behind Kinosuke. Before he could make any move, a cold light flashed through, and the sharp blade had already cut him in two. How could Konoha send such a small person? However, before the ghost word could be finished, there was only a bang, and the body that had been cut in half suddenly turned into two pieces of wood. You actually saw my clone. When Pu Yuan's eyes couldn't help but become serious, and the contempt for Kinosuke in his heart began to slowly disappear. Kid, I underestimated you. As Pu Yuan spoke, he turned the handle of the knife in his hand and hurriedly stopped the knife from behind. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his waist, but was kicked by Kinosuke in the meantime. Pu Yuan was furious. In terms of physical skills, he actually lost to a kid who was just genin. This made him feel very embarrassed. He immediately drew his sword and tried to regain the ground, but the subsequent battle made him more and more frightened. This kid's attainments in physical skills are actually far higher than his own. Although the sword skills of opening and closing are simple and unpretentious, they have some kind of experience that has been tempered for thousands of times. Every time he uses the sword, he has his own. The reason seems to not waste a single bit of effort, but it infinitely magnifies one's own advantages. This is a sword technique that only emerges through continuous training on the battlefield. Bloody flowers were continuously picked up from Pu Yuan's body by the sharp tip of the knife. Hyuga Schwerin looked at this scene dumbfounded and couldn't believe his eyes. Being pressed down and beaten by genin was simply unbearable for a Chunin. Bang! Pu Yuan finally found a gap and hurriedly used the body replacement technique to distance himself from someone. He began to form seals with his hands, preparing to use ninjutsu to make up for his weakness in physical skills. However, Kinosuke, who was already impatient, was not prepared to give him this opportunity. As soon as he moved his body, a certain skill exploded, and his speed increased several times. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Pu Yuan. With a look full of surprise and despair, he directly inserted a knife into his chest, then kicked him out with a kick. Cough cough cough. Pu Yuan reached out to cover the bleeding wound, his eyes full of panic. How is this possible? How did your speed increase so fast? How can you understand my explosive power and durability? Someone put away his knife and stood up. This Chunin was stabbed into the heart by him. With such an injury, everything seemed to be over for him. But unexpectedly, Pu Yuan burst out laughing. You kid is a kid, you talk too much. After saying this, he didn't even look like a dying person. He actually jumped up and was about to pounce on Hyuga who was nearby. Kinosuke raised his eyes and curled his lips, as the heart actually growing on the left side. It's really a bloody plot. However, even though he said this, he remained indifferent to Pu Yuan's actions at this time, as if he was expected to be unable to pose any threat at this time. Pu Yuan was in the air and looked at Kinosuke from the corner of his eye. He saw that he was motionless. Then he felt a sudden shock in his heart as if he felt something, but he suddenly fell down. My chakra. Why can't I suddenly feel the presence of chakra? What on earth have you done to me, kid? However, the only answer he received was the blade stabbed by someone slowly coming towards him. Ask Six Paths. Honey. The bandit mission finally ended successfully, but unfortunately, the Hyuga team did not suffer zero casualties. The young man named Uchiha Mizune paid the price of his life for his arrogance. When Fuyuan initially attacked, this talented boy wearing the Uchiwa fan mark was listed as the priority target with the highest threat, and he was given special care. Almost the moment Fuyuan burst into flames, he was pierced through the head by kunai, and he could not die anymore. As the saying goes, everyone is destined to die. It may be heavier than Mount Tai or lighter than a feather. Obviously, he belongs to the latter category. However, their leader Jonin cannot escape the punishment for his crimes. He had insufficient control over intelligence, and left his post without permission, putting his subordinates in danger. After this irresponsible behavior was despised by all parties, he was deprived of all responsibilities, and then turned to face the wall to think about it. As a result, Hyuga's team lost their leader Jonin, and without a companion, they were worried about how to deal with the third-generation project. But at this moment, the strange configuration of Orochimaru and Konosuke swaggered into the corner of his eye. Just right. The combination of two genin on one side and one jonin and one genin on the other side is like two completely integrated building blocks. It couldn't be more suitable. By the way, Sarutobi immediately talked to Orochimaru afterwards, and I don't know how the two of them talked. Anyway, Orochimaru was unwilling to teach at first, but in the end when he came out of the Hokage office, Konosuke was inexplicably too more teammate. Originally, Hyuga Schwerin and Gang Motosho were extremely surprised. After all, Orochimaru was the legendary Sannin. If he could be taught by him, he would be much stronger than any other Jonin. However, they later found out that things were not as beautiful as they imagined. Orochimaru had not paid much attention to Konosuke before and had been treating him like a free rein. Now that two people had joined him who had no intention of doing anything, Orochimaru simply treated him directly. He left them to Konosuke and let him lead him on missions all over the streets. Regarding this, Konosuke refused. Not only would the extra two people be helpful, but they might also greatly slow down his task because he couldn't let go. But he had to accept this decision because he had no choice. However, after going through a series of missions, Hyuga Schwerin slowly discovered that Konosuke's previous bragging was actually true. Every time she fought against different genin and even chunin, she felt that the situation was full of dangers. So Konosuke seemed to be in the ninja school. Have you already started this kind of mission? Every time she looked at the young man's indifference during extraordinary times during the mission, she couldn't help but tremble in her heart. Konosuke, what have you been experiencing all this time? Time flies by in the midst of non-stop tasks, and 1 year later, sakura flowers are flying. On that day, 3 students who graduated from the ninja school became genin. After a year, they shed their tenderness in the blood and could officially be called ninjas. Even during the rest time outside of missions, Konosuke never stopped training. It was precisely because of this strict requirement on himself, coupled with his own talent, that the speed at which he grew made Orochimaru look at him every moment, and the consequences were also surprising. Hokage senior officials have intensified their attention on Konosuke. If Anbu's figure collecting information from time to time can be counted as watching. As early as a few months ago, Konosuke, who was getting stronger, noticed that there were more and more vague eyes around him. Although Anbu did not despise Konosuke and used his best ability to hide and collect intelligence, he was still noticed by Konosuke. Even Konosuke himself thought this was proof that he had become stronger, but he didn't know that with his current strength, it is impossible to detect Anbu hiding in the dark. This is undoubtedly an indirect explanation of the current situation. The emptiness within Konoha. Konosuke, who found Anbu, remained calm and did not ask Orochimaru about this matter. After all, any special abilities he showed in the village already belonged to the rare blood inheritance limit. Now he is growing faster and faster, even if the Hokage sent a large group of Anbu to climb the corner to watch, he wouldn't be surprised. On this day, Konosuke, who had been training from early morning to noon, finally couldn't bear the hunger in his belly. He simply washed himself and went out to solve his stomach problem. Orochimaru had to go out for something, and Kinosuke rarely cooked by himself since he had earned income from performing tasks, and usually went directly to a restaurant. It was noon, there were not many people on the street, and Kinosuke was thinking about what to eat while walking. Kinosuke. Suddenly a familiar shout came from behind. Kinosuke stopped, turned to look at the owner of the voice, smiled and nodded, as a greeting. Gang Yuensho, who had seen the cold side of Kinosuke, was quite skeptical about his daily smile, but knowing his personality well, he was not surprised. When he walked up to Kinosuke, Gang Yuensho touched his head in embarrassment, whispered, Kinosuke, I want to treat you and Hyuga Schwerin to dinner. Are you sure? Kinosuke raised his eyebrows with excitement, and looked at Gang Yuensho seriously. The corner of the latter's mouth twitched slightly, but he suddenly thought of Kinosuke's foodie nature, pinched the wallet in his arms, and was a little suspicious of the money in the wallet. Whether it was enough, but in order to let Hyuga Schwerin come with him, he reluctantly nodded heavily. Free meal tickets were delivered to his door. Kinosuke had no reason to refuse and said with a smile, I happen to be hungry, how about eating barbecue? Or we can go eat steak, and I have always wanted to give it a try. Please forgive the sense of anticipation in a child who wants to eat meat. Someone who has limited appetite can't wait to eat a lot. In fact, Kinosuke was very helpless about the setting that he had to eat barbecue when he came to Hokage. I really want to eat ramen, but Otsutsuki Ichiraku's ramen shop hasn't opened yet, right? Nowadays, this is the only daily life, right? Gang Yuenshu's heart skipped a beat when he heard about the barbecue. He didn't wait for Kinosuke to come up with a more expensive proposal and hurriedly interrupted, I don't seem to have enough money. Trying to look away from a certain barbecue restaurant, Kinosuke curled his lips and said without forcing, then let's change to another one. Let's call Hyuga Schwerin first. Hearing what Kinosuke said, Gang Yuensho was overjoyed. He was not stingy, but he really didn't have enough money. Fortunately, Kinosuke took the initiative to come to the rescue. Otherwise, he wouldn't know what to do, and it was him who called Hyuga Schwerin first. The most urgent thoughts. How can I muster up the courage to confess my feelings to others when I don't even have the courage to invite them? Kinosuke, who was walking in front, shook his head slightly. He knew that Gang Yuensho was interested in Hyuga, but he also tacitly agreed and never said it clearly. After all, he would rely on this to make a living a few more times. When he was not performing tasks, Gang Yuensho would always use him as an excuse to invite Hyuga Schwerin. To be precise, it was to give him more confidence to invite Hyuga Schwerin. So relatively speaking, Kinosuke sincerely hopes that Gang Yuensho will remain in such a state, because he is becoming more and more able to eat, and the money from completing tasks can no longer fully guarantee his daily consumption. While passing by Kushina's house, Kinosuke suddenly frowned, but he vaguely noticed some unusual smells. If you're not from Konoha, then. Recently, Kinosuke has been practicing with Orochimaru, but the friendship between him, Minato and Kushina still exists. After all, the three of them have experienced a relatively long school time together and are all the best friends. Now feeling the unusual aura around Kushina's house, Kinosuke had a lot of thoughts for a moment. However, after discovering several auras belonging to Konoha Anbu hidden deeper in the darkness, he relaxed his brows. Although Konoha's people are now, it's not enough, but it's still reassuring in terms of safety. Probably an intelligence agent from another country's ninjas or something. It's none of your business, just hang up. Intensified by Gang Yuenshu's urging, although Kinosuke took this matter to heart, he still left in a hurry. Arriving at the door of the Hyuga family, Gang Yuensho stood on one side of the door as usual, pushed Kinosuke to the door, and handed over the task of calling the door to Kinosuke. It's really. Hyuga looked at Gang Modosho, who was cowering to one side, shook his head speechlessly, raised his head slightly, and shouted directly towards the door. Although Hyuga was from a prominent family in Konoha, he was nominally the adopted son of Orochimaru and had nothing to fear. Shui ran. Come out and meet me. Such unruly shouting echoed through the Hyuga mansion again. Then, as usual, Hyuga quickly appeared with a helpless look on his face. After all, the Hyuga family rules are very strict, and Kinosuke's yelling like this every time will eventually arouse the resentment of the tribe. What are you doing? He asked unceremoniously. Although he was resentful, Hyuga still couldn't express any anger towards Kinosuke, who greeted him with a smile. It would be better if he could inform him every time. Hearing the question, Kinnisuke smiled like a fox that got the chicken. He seemed to have forgotten his previous agreement with Gang Yuensho and said, "We will have barbecue for lunch today." An unexpected light appeared in Hyuga Schweren's eyes, the corner of her mouth curled up slightly, and she directly asked the most important question, "Are you treating me?" Kinnisuke raised his eyebrows, spread his hands and said, "How is that possible?" "I think so, you guys are just a tough guy." Hyuga Schweren patted his forehead and said helplessly, "Where are Gang Yuensho and others?" I'm here." Gang Yuensho, who was secretly counting money, leaned out his upper body from one side and smiled at Hyuga. Hyuga Schweren rolled his eyelids when he saw this, turned around and said something, then followed Kinnisuke and the two to the street. "Which barbecue restaurant are you going to?" Walking on the street, Kinnisuke asked Gang Yuensho. As he asked, his eyes involuntarily drifted towards the direction of the most expensive barbecue restaurant. Gang Yuensho was shocked when he saw this. He didn't want to give this guy any chance to speak. He quickly pointed to a barbecue restaurant not far away with average taste and price, and said, "This is the one, it tastes very good." Okay. Kinnisuke looked away with some disappointment, but it was good to be able to eat barbecue and be full. Hyuga Schweren, who was watching from the side, shook his head and said, "Kinnisuke, when will you treat us to dinner?" Faced with such words from the opposite gender, Hinosuke gave Hyuga Schweren a slap on the back of the head, and then said more simply, "No money." This made Hyuga Schweren look at Kinnisuke walking towards the barbecue restaurant with a dark look on his face. In fact, Kinnisuke's finances are very tight. You must know that he needs to eat a lot of food every day, and the reward from tasks alone can only be average. It can be said that all his rewards are spent on eating, and even one meal is not enough. "I haven't bought any new clothes, and all I wear are Orochimaru's old clothes." After being together for a long time, Hyuga Schweren naturally knew this, but she said that before because she couldn't stand Kinnisuke's behavior of exploiting honest people in her name. After entering the barbecue restaurant, with the idea of not wasting any money, Kinnisuke directly ordered barbecue for 20 people at once. Gang Yuensho and Hyuga Schweren, who had long been accustomed to this, were not too surprised, not even the waiter who took the order, because Hinosuke's reputation as a big eater had already spread throughout the world as he continued to eat and drink. The streets of Konoha. And, are these 20 portions enough? Looking at a certain foodie holding a plate and eating fiercely, it was difficult for Hyuga Schweren and Gang Yuensho to overlap him with the ruthless figure performing the mission. They were completely like two different people. He is cold-blooded and cruel when fighting, but in daily life he is so approachable and even a bit funny. It is hard to imagine that someone would divide his life into such an arrangement, but there is no doubt that Kinnisuke's character is the most popular among the three. Welcome, because he has both personalities and is both reliable and easy to get along with. Under the watchful eyes of his companions and customers in the store, Kinnisuke performed a real-time Akoku broadcast, sweeping the grilled meat on the table into his mouth as quickly as the autumn wind swept fallen leaves. That kind of fast-eating speed would probably put even the Akamaki clan to shame. In less than 5 minutes, the number of empty plates stained with oil on the table had increased to a terrifying number. Gang Yuensho looked at Kinnisuke blankly, and the meat slices on the chopsticks fell on the table with a bang, while Hyuga Schweren had already filled his plate with enough portions. As if that wasn't enough, Kinnisuke touched his belly, still feeling a slight sense of hunger, and frowned slightly, but even though he was not satisfied yet, he had no intention of continuing to order barbecue. After all, he couldn't really eat all of Gang Yuensho. After sighing inwardly, he looked at Hyuga Schweren, who was slowly eating barbecue on the plate. Sensing Kinnisuke's gaze, Hyuga Schweren quickly pulled the plate back, warily looked at Kinnisuke's wolf-like expression, and hummed, "Don't expect me to share it with you." Whispering sound. Kinnisuke tilted his head, not surprised by the result. At this time, Gang Yuensho, who had come back to his senses, trembled with his arms, picked up the piece of barbecue that fell on the table, threw it into his mouth and chewed it silently. After a while, he swallowed the barbecue and used this short time to chew the barbecue. He took the time to calculate the money in his wallet, and then, on the verge of tears, a trace of far-fetched expression appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he said, do you still want it?" Kinosuke's eyes lit up when he heard this, but he was not the kind of person who was dissatisfied, so he shook his head and said no. Gang Yuensho breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. If it were someone else, he wouldn't be like this, but Kinosuke's stomach is like a bottomless pit. You will never know how much food he can swallow. Although Kinosuke stopped eating, Gang Yuensho, who had only eaten 2 slices of barbecue, was too embarrassed to scream anymore, so he stared blankly at the plate with only a small piece of grease stain. Suddenly, a pair of chopsticks holding barbecue reached into his plate and placed a piece of barbecue. Gang Yuensho turned his head to look at Hyuga Schwerin, who was sitting on the back. The latter divided half of the barbecue on the plate into the former's plate. Hyuga Schwerin. Gang Yuensho looked moved. Eat quickly, don't let someone snatch it away. Hyuga Schwerin said and glanced at Kinosuke, who looked unmoved and looked out the window with a smile on his chin. After eating, Gang Yuensho suggested taking a walk in the Sakura Flower District, and Kinosuke and Hyuga happily agreed. At this time, sakura flowers are in full bloom, and the area full of sakura trees welcomes many villagers. The pink petals are fluttering in the wind, and the unique fragrance of sakura flowers floats in the air. Hyuga Schwerin looked at the sakura petals flying in the sky, thinking of the various experiences in the year, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As a member of the Hyuga branch house, those who were born were destined to be like servants. They could not escape the lofty gaze of the Zong family. Fortunately, the 2 companions beside them never showed any emotions because of their status. Even if there is only one trace, what's more, every time Kinosuke yells in the Hyuga mansion, it is a disguised way of showing his identity as a disciple of Orochimaru. At least his life will be much better after that. Looking at Kinosuke, who was full of interest with his hands in his pockets, and Gang Modosho, who always had a rosy look on his face when he looked at him, Hyuga couldn't help but have a smile on his face. In the evening, Gang Yuensho said goodbye to Hyuga Schwerin and Kinosuke with some reluctance, and left first. Kinosuke looked at Gang Yuensho's elongated figure in the dusk, and asked Hyuga Schwerin beside him, "You won't continue like this forever, will you?" "Continue for what?" Hyuga pretended to be stupid and asked, but the look he looked at Kinosuke contained an inexplicable meaning. "It's nothing." Kinosuke shook his head, turned around, waved and left. In fact, he thought this was fine. After Kinosuke's figure disappeared around a corner, Hyuga Schwerin sighed slightly. She knew that Gang Yuensho liked her, but she had no interest in Gang Yuensho at all. She wanted to make Gang Yuensho give up as soon as possible, but she didn't want to think about Gang Yuensho. Yuensho's character made her a little helpless. She shook her head to throw these troubles out of her mind, looked at the direction Kinosuke left with complicated eyes again, and turned to leave. "Aren't you the same as me?" Kinosuke. At the corner, Kinosuke leaned his back against the wall, looking slightly sideways at Hyuga's retreating figure, and shook his head helplessly. Just like Gang Yuensho did to Hyuga Schwerin, how could he not feel Hyuga Schwerin's friendship for him? However, in a world full of unknowns such as ninjutsu, immortals, wars, monsters, and tailed beasts, how can you fall in love if your strength cannot reach a certain level? Tailed beast. By the way, Kushina is not a Jinchuriki from Konoha, and this is during World War II. Oops. Kinosuke suddenly recalled some intricate plots, and was suddenly shocked, but he remembered the strange atmosphere around Kushina's house at noon. This time period is probably the timeline when Cloud Shinobi Village comes to snatch the tailed beasts and Jinchuriki. Someone who figured out these key points was shocked and couldn't help but turn around and rush towards Kushina's house. How could I forget this? Although Kushina was rescued by Minato in the plot, his arrival is now inserted into the plot line and will definitely change some plot developments. Kushina and Minato have a good relationship with him, but he cannot bet on whether Minato can arrive in time to rescue, or whether it was a successful rescue of Kushina. Konoha village is very large. It uses Hokage rock as one wall and a large area surrounded by tall walls. In addition to dense residential areas, there is also a forest of death within the walls. It can be said that the huge Konoha village has both. Where there is prosperity, there are also remote places, and the place where Shinjunai lives is a relatively remote area. When Shinosuke rushed to Kushina's house, he only saw several Konoha shinobi lying in a pool of blood. His expression changed on the spot. After briefly checking the situation, a trace of solemnity flashed in his eyes. Several Konoha shinobi were dead. There were many wounds. The fatal wound was a cut across the throat. The blood that flowed out had a trace of temperature, indicating that the time of death was not long. Kushina. Konosuke glanced at the mansion. After not sensing Kushina's aura, a look of worry appeared in his eyes, and he immediately ran towards the nearest wall. He didn't have time to notify others, and he was sure that Anbu, who was secretly following him, would naturally inform the Hokage when he saw this. Sure enough, the moment he climbed over the wall and left the village, Konosuke could no longer sense the aura of Anbu following him. After climbing over the wall and leaving the village, Konosuke was a little confused. Without effective tracking methods, even if the enemy had just kidnapped Kushina and left, he could not tell which direction the enemy was going. How did Minato find Kushina in the plot? Konosuke stopped for a moment, trying hard to recall the plot. Suddenly, in the last ray of the sun setting, several pure red hair tied by kunai came into his eyes. Those few pure red hairs lying quietly were like the dawn in the dark night, extremely dazzling. Seeing the hair, Konosuke was stunned. He quickly picked up the hair and inspected it for a moment. After confirming that it was Kushina's hair, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that someone had already rushed over. Is it Minato? Without any hesitation, he put the hair and kunai back to their original places, then stood up and chased the enemy ninja who had kidnapped Kushina. He is not so arrogant that he can save Kushina by himself and Minato. The other party can take Kushina from the tightly guarded Konoha, so he is naturally very powerful. I don't know how Minato successfully rescued Kushina in the plot. This is really confusing. I remember that the reason why Cloud Shinobi snatched Kushina was because of the death of the former Eight Tails Jinchuriki. The desperate Cloud Shinobi village decided to capture the Uzumaki tribesmen who could perfectly seal the tailed beast at all costs. Then Cloud Shinobi must have sent a strong enough elite force to break through Konoha's defense and take Kushina out of the village. As for why they were solved by Minato later, there is probably only one reason, and that is that most of the ninjas in this force were attracted by the dispatch. The attention of Konoha's strong men. After all, Jiraiya was also in the village at that time, so the ninja holding Kushina hostage now should not be too powerful. Thinking of this, Konosuke couldn't help but speed up his steps again. It took a lot of time to look for hair strands along the way. Fortunately, Kushina's hair is a conspicuous red, so it will not be so difficult to find after nightfall. Even so, Konosuke, who had been chasing Kushina for several hours, still couldn't see any trace of anyone. He couldn't go on like this and had to speed up, because once the other party took Kushina across the border, it would be impossible again. There is no room for redemption. On the other side, the Cloud Shinobi ninjas who kidnapped Kushina were moving at full speed from the beginning, but their progress was greatly reduced due to Kushina's deliberate delay. Trash. The ninja responsible for pulling Kushina cursed angrily, turned his gaze to the tall man in front, and asked, "Master Tamnu, we are already here, and I hope the Konoha people can't catch up. Do you want to slow down?" The ninja known as Tamnu has a rugged face, dark complexion, and a ferocious scar that runs vertically through his entire right face. His expression is as cold as ice, giving him a fierce and violent aura just by looking at his face. After hearing the subordinate's inquiry, Tamnu paused for a moment. The other members of the team went to intercept and lure away Konoha's strong men. Presumably, they would not be able to catch up here at this time. In addition, the three subordinates marched at full speed for half a day. Even after coming down from the road, he was tired, but the fatigue of traveling at full speed was not enough to cope with unexpected situations. After figuring out other key points, Tamnu agreed to his subordinate's suggestion. He glanced at Kushina, who had her head lowered as if she might collapse at any time, and said coldly, "You can slow down, the border is coming soon, but always be vigilant and don't be careless." Yes, the three Cloud Shinobi looked relaxed. The high-intensity traveling at full speed really made them feel tired, let alone Kushina. If it weren't for the physical characteristics of the Uzumaki clan, if it were someone else, I'm afraid she would have been unconscious after traveling so fast. It's over. However, when they made this decision, they did not know that a cheating boy was following closely behind them. Half an hour later, Cloud Shinobi, who was walking on Torafu, seemed to be taking a walk, as if he could see that this difficult task had been completed, but his vigilance began to drop significantly involuntarily. Only in the eyes of Tamnu with the ferocious scar still full of vigilance. Compared with Cloud Shinobi's relaxation, Kushina, whose consciousness was already somewhat blurred, was filled with despair. Who can help me? In the shaking vision, there was only a dark road, and a vague figure suddenly appeared. Golden hair and blue eyes blended into the night, clear and blurry. The figure trembling in the dark night, the face that was clear and blurry at times, seemed to be very close. It was originally full of sunshine, but now it has a cold look on his face. Watergate. A ray of light quietly appeared in Kushina's gray eyes, and her weak voice made her voice tremble and blurred. Minato, Cloud Shinobi, who was pulling Kushina, heard the vague whisper and couldn't help but look back at Kushina. Stop. At this time, Tamnu, who was walking at the front, suddenly stopped, put one hand on the handle of the knife at his waist, and suddenly turned around and looked behind him. Seeing Tamnu's reaction, how could the other three not know that someone was catching up? Their hearts skipped a beat, and they immediately looked warily into the night behind them, only to see a figure emerging from the big trees in the forest. A few jumps, like divine weapons descending from the sky, landed on the ground not far away. A person, or a kid. Seeing that the pursuer was just a Konoha kid, the three Cloud Shinobi breathed a sigh of relief. They thought they were being chased by a large number of Konoha Shinobi. Caught up. Namikaze Minato panted slightly, looked at the familiar figure in front of him, a trace of urgency flashed in his eyes, and said loudly, "Kushina, are you okay?" Different from the past, this voice was indeed full of anxiety and impatience, rather than the simple concern for his teammates in the past. Hearing this familiar and warm voice, Kushina, who thought she saw a phantom, slowly turned her head, but she was startled, and she really saw Minato. Minato. As if she had been saved after seeing Minato, Kushina's eyes slowly opened wide, and a gleam of joy flashed across her stained little face. Did you think you were going to be saved? The cold and emotionless voice in her ears ruthlessly shattered Kushina's delusions. Tamnu crossed Kushina, stared at Minato with a murderous look on his face, and said coldly, "You have a good expression. Since you dared to chase me alone, you must be prepared to die, right?" As he spoke, Tamnu slowly pulled out the short sword from his waist, and his eyes suddenly became extremely cold at this moment. "You pass the border quickly with your goals. I will deal with this little brat. If nothing else happens, I'm afraid there will be pursuers later." Yes, although they didn't know why Tamnu insisted on cutting off the rear, they still strictly obeyed the order despite the prohibition, and decisively dragged Kushina to speed up and ran towards the border ahead. Hateful. Minato stared at the short sword in the man's hand in front of him with a solemn expression. His purpose was indeed just to hold him back. If the other party chose to leave one person behind, that would be the best. However, in his imagination, he could only see it by himself. For this reason, the person who looks weak and underestimates the enemy should not be the strongest person. But why did he happen to be the one left behind? The cold water passed through the woods and fell down, but the water light condensed into ice crystals illuminated the short sword that shone with the cold front. To Minato, the sharp blade was comparable to a Shinigami's scythe. There is no doubt that all the Konoha shinobi in front of the Kushina gate probably died in the hands of this man. They were all killed by slitting their throats with a knife. However, the Konoha shinobi had many other minor injuries before they died, so it can be judged that the man's sword was not close to ultimate, otherwise he would not have chosen to attack Konoha shinobi directly from the shadows. No odds, no, just very, very low. Minato's expression was extremely ugly, and he was secretly anxious. Not to mention being restrained by this person, it was already very difficult to survive in this person's hands. In this way, there was no way to prevent Kushina from being taken away. Silently taking out the kunai and holding it in his hand, Minato gritted his teeth tightly and forced his eyes not to look at Kushina who was being taken away, but to stare at the man who had begun to exude a murderous aura. The actual murderous aura coming towards his face made him the surrounding air seemed to become thicker. Tamnu seemed to have full confidence. He did not take action immediately. Instead, he looked at Minato, whose breathing had stabilized, with a flash of praise in his eyes. He was able to catch up at such a fast speed and was not fooled by their trap. His breath was not messy yet, which proved that the kid in front of him was not simple. As for age, it was never an indicator of strength. It's a pity that this kid who may be Konoha's genius is still too young. If he catches up so recklessly, the price he has to pay will be very heavy. Do you know why I want to stay? Tamnu raised his arms a little, with murderous intent on his face, because I saw your strength. Others are not as good as you. Kid, don't think you are pretending. The weak appearance will make people take it lightly. The world of ninja is not as simple as you think. Now let me help you teach you a lesson, and the price is your life. Just when he was about to take action, he stopped and saw a figure falling next to Minato. Minato was attracted to Tamnu because of his spirit. When he found the fast figure, the other party had already arrived beside him. Minato's heartbeat quickened instantly, and when he was about to attack the figure, the familiar voice of the other party made him stop the attack. Where's Kushina? Shinosuke's eyes were fixed on the fierce cloud shinobi in front of him, and his expression became solemn in an instant. As soon as he met him, he knew that the man in front of him was very strong. Another brat. Is there no one left in Konoha? Tamnu frowned. It would have been fine if the Konoha shinobi who was chasing him was Jonin, but he didn't expect that it was actually two brats who were chasing him. It's not simple. What's the conspiracy in Konoha? Seeing Shinosuke catching up, Minato's eyes flashed with joy and he pointed in one direction and said, Kushina is now being held hostage by 3 cloud shinobi. She is probably approaching the border. Hurry up and chase after this man. To contain it. No, no, no. To Minato's surprise, Shinosuke rejected his suggestion without even thinking. It's up to you to save Kushina, but leave this cloud shinobi to me. As he said that, Shinosuke had already put on a fighting stance, staring at Cloud Shinobi with his eyes fixed on Cloud Shinobi, but he put away his usual smiling face. This ninja was very powerful and must be prepared carefully. But Minato hesitated. He didn't think Konosuke could deal with the man in front of him, and there was a high possibility that he would be killed by him. Farewell, mother-in-law. If it's 1 minute later, once Kushina is taken out of the country, it will be all over. Seeing that Minato was still so stained by the incident, Konosuke couldn't help but curled his lips. Hearing this, Minato took a deep look at Konosuke, determination flashed across his face. He could not let down Konosuke who risked his life, so he must save Kushina. Having made his decision, Minato ignored Tamnu's presence like an arrow and headed towards the direction where Kushina was taken away. Too arrogant, kid. A flash of anger flashed across Tamnu's face. While surprised by Minato's speed, he flashed to Minato's side, raised his knife and brought it down with precise and vicious timing. But in the face of this fatal knife, Minato didn't even look at it. He could only look ahead, because he knew that someone would block the knife for him. Hey, I don't want to say it, but your opponent is me. The slightly cynical words reached the ears of the two people with a hint of indifference. Sure enough, at this moment, Konosuke stood between the two of them, and there was only a clang sound. In the dark night, the fire was flying, but Konosuke held a short sword, but he firmly blocked Tamnu's attack at the critical moment. With one blow, Minato took advantage of this opportunity and disappeared into the darkness without looking back. Kid, you're pretty good. But you have to pay the price for your confidence. Tamnu, who watched Minato disappear and missed the best time to pursue, laughed angrily, and a murderous intention came out of his mouth. Konosuke's arm trembled and he felt a heavy force. The short sword shone with a cold light and even stung his skin slightly. So strong. Cloud Shinobi Village is indeed a village famous for its physical skills in the Hokage world, but now this Jonin has reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship. By the way, why would I risk my life to stay and face such a powerful enemy? Konosuke couldn't help but feel a little pain for a moment. Why would I risk my life for the people of this world when I don't agree with this world? In such a life-threatening duel, Konosuke's thoughts were divided. Why would I think about this kind of problem during the battle? I was eating barbecue just now. Why did I come here when my brain got hot? Are you going to fight a Jonin like you're trying to die? In the dead of night, the sound of the night owl comes from far and near. Under the cold moon, such a sad and shrill sound is touching. Under the moonlight, although the light in the forest was dim, it was enough to see clearly the ray of light coming from the sky, which appeared and disappeared in an instant. Clang! The violent sound of iron weapons resounded throughout the forest. Sparks flew, and two figures crossed each other in the forest, leaping into the branches on both sides. A little light shone in Konosuke's dark eyes, and he held the short sword firmly, like a rock, refusing to give in. If he backed away, the shimmering sharp weapon would cut his throat mercilessly. You can see my sword clearly. Even though you don't want to admit it, you are no less skilled than me in terms of sword skills. You are proud to have such sword skills at such a young age, but I have to say that you are at your age. But it will soon become the only factor in your failure. There is an unknown fear hidden deep in Tamnu's eyes, but he seems to be obsessed with the pleasure of killing the genius. Under constant suppression, he will always say a few words after Konosuke blocks his knife, completely different from his usual indifferent demeanor. In response to Tamnu's words, Konosuke remained silent, or in other words, he simply didn't have the energy to speak now. As Tamnu said, he who fully inherited Galen's destiny could indeed see clearly what Tamnu was doing. Ben Lei's sword can also clearly see the trajectory coming from the sky, but it also confirms his words. He is still weak now and is not enough to exert the full power of the Life Star. Therefore, even if Konosuke can clearly see Tamnu's offensive, even if his sword skills are as powerful as Tamnu, his body cannot support him to carry out an effective counterattack, and even he can only rely on Tamnu's powerful strength and thunder. He struggled to resist at such a speed. The physical fitness that he was proud of was crushed by the opponent, and the control of chakra that he was quite proud of was useless. Facing the enemy's offensive that didn't stop for a moment, he couldn't even use ninjutsu, and could only rely on the Life Star to bring him experience, blocking the opponent's knife time and time again. However, even so, Konosuke was still not panicked. Sure enough, everything about ninjutsu is empty. At the critical moment, you still have to fight for cheat. Clang, clang, clang. From time to time sparks flashed through the dimly lit woods. This brat, seeing the cunning and vicious attacks being diffused by Konosuke, the fear deep in Tamnu's eyes reappeared in his eyes again. Although he already thought that Konosuke was a rare genius, due to the strength gap between the two sides, he was still a small. He despised Konosuke, so he did not use all his strength at the beginning. Although it seemed that he could still suppress Konosuke and was miserable, he was never able to cause real and substantial harm to the opponent. Once again, they were fighting hand to hand. After Tamnu suppressed Konosuke with endless strength, he stared at him tightly, frowned slightly, and said coldly, "I still underestimate you." Suddenly, as Konosuke frowned, wisps of thunder light suddenly appeared all over Tamnu's body. Sheath the knife, swing it out, and do it in one go. As the lightning flashed, its sharp edge contained cold murderous intent. Konosuke's eyes narrowed sharply, and he immediately noticed that Tamnu's speed had increased significantly. "Goodbye, kid." The short sword, which was also flashing with lightning, passed through Konosuke's blockage and stabbed him in the throat. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.